It's 6 o'clock Central African time, and it's a Wednesday, which just means it's the middle of the week. And I'm Peter Ndoro saying good morning to Asanda, Beda.
Good morning, Peter Ndoro, and I'm Asanda Beda saying good morning back to Peter Ndoro.
Yes, thanks so much indeed for joining us for Rise and Shine right here on Channel Africa, where we bring you the African perspective. And we're broadcasting, of course, as always, from our studios in Johannesburg, South Africa, on the internet, www.channelafrica.co.za. But you can also catch us on our social media pages. Essentially, look for Channel Africa and you'll find us pretty much everywhere. And therefore, you can listen and watch at the same time.
We welcome your views, of course. And in this hour, in the show generally, we'll be looking at a few things. Benin, we spoke about this earlier, where they were in debates about whether to amend the constitution. So now it's been approved, an amendment to Benin's constitution that will extend the presidential term in that country from 5 to 7 years. The presidential term still remains at 2 terms per president. And then in Kenya, Amnesty International has undertaken a report that looked into the 2024-2025 Gen Z protests, and quite a few number of things have emerged there in terms of those who have been killed and which particular groups that have been highlighted, those who are women and members of the LGBTQI plus communities. We'll find out more about that and more stories, of course. Let's start now, though, with our news update. Here's Onele Nzinzi at 6:02, and then we'll have sports headlines with Musibudi Makura after her.
SABC News, the African perspective.
Thank you, Asanda, and a very good morning to our listeners. Political analyst and academic Dr. Mary De Haas from the KwaZulu-Natal Violence Monitor has told South Africa's Parliament's ad hoc committee that she found the resources spent on crimes related to politicians absurd when people in general find it difficult to access justice. The committee was established to look into allegations of criminal infiltration, corruption and political interference in the criminal justice system. De Haas wrote to Police Minister Senzo Mchunu, currently on special leave, calling for the police political killings task team to be shut down because, according to her, it had consumed a significant chunk of resources over 6 years with little tangible results. Her letter was used as reference by Mchunu as one of the reasons he disbanded the task team. De Haas explained why she thought the PKTT needed to be disbanded.
I see people dying and the police doing nothing, and yet we're spending this money on this team. I think it's outrageous, quite frankly, when ordinary people can't get justice, they want closure, they don't get it. You don't even hear about them being killed. They're killed all the time in rural areas. No one's paying attention and doing anything special for them. Why are we doing something special for politicians?
U.S. President Donald Trump's absence at the G20 summit in South Africa due to U.S. allegations of racism in the host country presents an opportunity for South African leaders to highlight pressing global issues such as climate change and sustainable debt for low-income nations. The summit's significant as the first G20 in Africa allows other nations to step up in leadership roles amid the absence of the U.S. President Donald Trump. President Cyril Ramaphosa plans to symbolically hand over the G20 presidency to an empty chair for Trump. The situation permits other leaders, particularly from Europe and China, to enhance bilateral ties and assert their influence, focusing on Africa's development needs and partnership. South Africa's presidency, the Global Leaders Network and other organizations are hosting an event aimed at addressing the slow progress in reducing maternal and child mortality rates. Leaders from various sectors are convening in Johannesburg for the G20 Social Summit side event to highlight the urgent need for renewed global commitment to women, newborn babies, children and adolescents' health as a fundamental priority for sustainable development. The head of communications, Torre, explains.
causes related to maternal health are the first leading cause of mortality for young women ages 15 to 19. So this is really a critical issue for us to tackle. Now, we know that the G20 economies are extremely important. They account for 80% of the world's global economies and have enormous capacity to influence priorities across the world. So we've been having a meeting today to discuss these issues and how they can be prioritized across agendas globally.
South Africa's Defence Department says it has noted with concern comments made by the Chief of the South African Navy, Vice Admiral Monde Lubisi, during the SA Navy Gala dinner held at the weekend. The department says in his speech, Vice Admiral Lubisi made an unfortunate statement, aspersions as the leadership of government. Defence Head of Communications, Piwe Dlamini, says the minister regards the remarks as inappropriate.
The minister regards his remarks not only as inappropriate, disingenuous, and unfortunate, on a matter that he is fully aware is receiving attention at all levels, starting from within the department to Parliament. The minister will be taking appropriate steps to deal with this unfortunate outburst were still from a senior person at his level. The views expressed at the event do not reflect the official position of the department.
And lastly, police in southern India say they've killed one of the country's most wanted rebel leaders. The police chief is Andhra Pradesh, says Madhavi Hidma was killed in an armed confrontation along with at least 6 other rebels. The BBC's Sanjay Daguspa.
Madhavi Hidma is suspected to have been involved in a number of deadly attacks, including an infamous daytime ambush in Chhattisgarh Strait in 2013, in which 27 people were gunned down. Among the dead were prominent politicians and the leader of a feared paramilitary outfit with a reputation for targeting Maoists and their suspected sympathizers. In the poverty-stricken forested tracts of central India that was once considered their heartland, the Maoists are clearly on the back foot. Many have surrendered. Those who haven't are being wiped out by aggressive police action.
Channel Africa News, I am Onele Ntsintsi.
SABC News. The African Perspective.
And coming up in your sports news this hour, ASEC Mimosas will face off with AS FAR in the final of the CAF Women's Champions League, while 4 Springbok players nominated for the World Player of the Year. Details at 6:30.
Wake up, Africa. Peter Ndoro and Asanda Beda are here to help you rise and shine. Weekdays, 6 till 9 a.m. Central African Time. Only on Channel Africa.
All right, it's a little bit after the news, of course. It's 8 minutes past 6 Central African Time. And at this time every day after the news, we bring you something that we call the Africa Roundup. And this is an opportunity for us to catch you up on what's been happening across the continent and beyond, particularly in the past 24 hours. And we give you a concise wrap so that you're up to date and we set you up for the news day ahead. And we start the Africa Roundup with this story. Umaro Sissoco, Mbalo, who's bidding to become the first sitting president in 3 decades to win re-election in Guinea-Bissau and when voters head to the polls on Sunday. But his tenure has delivered very little stability to a country long marred by political turmoil. This is Vanessa Chan reports.
His government has reported multiple attempts to oust him since he took office in 2020. That included a coup attempt in 2022, in which gunfire rang out for hours near the compound where he was holding a cabinet meeting. Mbalo has also faced frequent challenges to his legitimacy. Opponents insist the 53-year-old former army general did not actually win the 2019 election. More recently, they said he has overstayed his constitutional mandate by several months. Even so, Mbalo is in a strong position to win a second term. That's partly because the man widely seen as his top challenger, former Prime Minister Domingos Simoes Pereira, has been barred from contesting.
In Sudan's displacement camps, women are recounting the loss of husbands and brothers during the siege of Al-Fasher. Aid agencies warn thousands remain unaccounted for amid growing reports of atrocities. Cara Angeline Oliver reports.
At a camp for the displaced in Sudan's Aldaba, women who escaped the siege in Al Fashir tell the story of how they lost their male relatives in the fighting, with the fate of some of the men still unknown.
There's no tent where you'll find women saying their husbands came with them, except for the elderly men. But most people are like me. I have lost my husband.
The war finished them off. We have no man or a brother left to stand by us. We're only women left.
Al Fashir was the final stronghold of the Sudanese army in the vast western Darfur region before it fell to the RSF on October 26 after an 18-month siege. Now the Sudanese Red Crescent says almost 80% of those in the Aldaba camp are women, with the rest mainly being elderly men. Salma Mohammed lost her husband in Al Fashir.
I am one of those whose husbands were martyred in Al Fashir. I have 4 children, 3 girls and a boy, and I am now 7 months pregnant. I just entered my 8th month.
The United Nations Deputy Secretary General Amina Mohammed has warned that the Security Council that armed conflict is now the leading force behind acute food insecurity in nearly all of the world's hunger hotspots. 14 out of 16 countries are facing the gravest risk at this time.
Excellency Julius Maada Bio, President of the Republic of Sierra Leone, distinguished members of the Security Council, Excellency, colleagues. Thank you for convening this debate. I commend the Republic of Sierra Leone for placing conflict-related food insecurity squarely where it belongs, at the centre of this Council's agenda. Sierra Leone brings profound understanding to this debate. When you have lived through conflict's devastation, you know with absolute clarity that war destroys more than infrastructure. It destroys the ability to feed your children and your communities. Excellencies, war and hunger are often two faces of the same crises. They are a lived reality for hundreds of millions trapped in conflict zones, which bears this out with brutal clarity.
Alphabet Chief Executive Sundar Pichai says no tech company would escape the fallout if the artificial intelligence boom were to burst, with soaring valuations and hefty investment stoking fears of a bubble. Francis Maguire reports.
That was the warning from the CEO of Google owner Alphabet, Sundar Pichai. He made the claim during a BBC interview published Tuesday.
No company is going to be immune, including us. If you overinvest, we'll have to work through that phase.
Pichai said he thought Google could cope if a possible bubble burst, and further called the current wave of AI investment an extraordinary moment. While he said there might be some elements of irrationality in the market, Pichai was positive about the future for AI technology.
It's also true when we go through these investment cycles, there are moments we overshoot, right, collectively as an industry. We can look back at the internet right now. There was clearly a lot of excess investment, but none of us would question whether the internet was profound or did it drive a lot of impact. It's fundamentally changed how we work digitally as a society. I expect AI to be the same.
And that's how we come to the end of today's edition of the Africa Roundup. We'll have more for you tomorrow after the 6 o'clock news. Stay with us, though, because coming up shortly, we're going to do a deep dive into what's been happening in West Africa. And that's with our regular commentator, Dr. Matsanga.
Siyabangena manje. Vito iJabulani Nkolele iMagoda. Jabulani is a young man from Giyani in Limpopo in South Africa. Very easy guy, taking things easy. To know me is to know that I love what I do, which I'm crazy about it. So when you hear me on radio, expect the best. Expect great music. Expect great content. Expect 180 minutes of nothing but fun. You'll find me on the morning reset, 3 to 6 a.m., Monday to Friday. Siyabangena baba. Ay. Mbuleke.
Mix Vibration sur Channel Africa.
Qu'est-ce qui vous a amené à dire ça? Est-ce que vous avez observé un certain nombre d'événements dans la vie? Est-ce que c'était par rapport à une expérience? Est-ce que vous avez rencontré des choses qui vous ont dit il faut de la patience, comme ça les choses vont venir au bon moment et le bon Dieu pourra peut-être me visiter?
Oui, c'était justement un conseil que le Seigneur m'a fait inspirer pour donner à son peuple, parce qu'il y a la plupart des gens, pendant que Dieu bénit les autres, ils pensent que Dieu les a oubliés, et pendant que Dieu ouvre pour les autres, ils pensent que peut-être Dieu n'a pas pu écouter leurs prières. Alors ce n'est pas le cas. Alors Dieu bénit tout un chacun de nous avec son temps. Donc le temps de Dieu est toujours le meilleur dans la vie de tout un chacun de nous.
Mix Vibration tous les dimanches de 18h à 19h, temps universel.
Je, una jambo lolote akilini mwako? Je, una shauku kuhusu maswala muhimu? Na je, una maoni ambayo unataka yasikike? Kweli, hili jukwaa ni la kwako. Piga simu au tuandikie kwenda WhatsApp namba alama ya kujumulisha 2760552594 na tutakupigia simu.
Mtangazaji wa habari zetu za Afrika Kusini mjini Johannesburg.
Hivyo unaweza kuwa mshirika kwenye matangazo yetu. Sio mazungumzo tu, ni fursa yako ya kuchangia maoni yako na kushirikiana na jumuiya ya wasikilizaji wanaotamani mtazamo wako. Tufuate kwenye mitandao ya kijamii. Tembelea tovuti yetu www.channelafrica.co.za na uwe tayari kushiriki na kuchangia maoni yako kwenye Channel Africa. Channel Africa, mtazamo wa Kiafrika.
New day, new stories. Start your morning right with Rise and Shine on Channel Africa.
Before we go to West Africa, let's take a look at this story here. The South African Responsible Gambling Foundation has expressed concern about the growing number of young people who are addicted to gambling. The foundation is among many role players that are attending the Gaming Regulators Africa Forum's 16th annual conference at Sun City, which is just northwest of Johannesburg. Zebulon Maine reports.
The rapid growth of illegal online gambling is among many issues that will be discussed during this conference. Buitumelo Kalinge is the acting CEO of the Northwest Gambling Board.
Among a lot of topics that will be discussed in this GRAF conference, it's illegal gambling and responsible gambling, which comes to the forefront. We must remember that we have here policymakers, we have here member states who are making laws in different states. So we are going to be discussing those issues of illegal gambling. How can we tackle illegal gambling as gambling regulators?
A big concern for the South African Responsible Gambling Foundation is the many young people that have gambling problems. A big concern for the South African Responsible Gambling Foundation is the many young people that have gambling problems. Sibongile Similane Kuntana is the director of the foundation.
The trend that we're noticing is that it's affecting mostly the youth, people who are of the legal age to gamble between the ages 18 and 35. They are the mostly affected, and also those that are unemployed who actually depend on the social relief discretionary grant, and also your students, your SASA. And I think from our point of view, when we say that it mostly affects them, because we are saying that those monies are actually monies that they should be spent on themselves, on their households.
Similane Kuntana adds that some who are addicted to gambling are coming forward to get assistance.
We've got psychoeducation therapy, where you actually see a psychologist, a clinical social worker, or a clinical psychologist. We actually we provide 8 sessions per individual. But if an individual is so much affected, the treatment professionals can actually motivate for more sessions. We then have a national responsible gambling group, where once you've finished your sessions, you can then attend those groups sessions, which we do on a weekly basis, every weekend on a Saturday. We also have inpatient. We then rehabilitate people in a hospital.
I'm Zebulon Maine in Rustenburg, Northwest.
New day, new stories. Start your morning right with Rise and Shine on Channel Africa.
Je, una jambo lolote akilini mwako? Je, una shauku kuhusu maswala muhimu? Na je, una maoni ambayo unataka yasikike? Kweli, hili jukwaa ni la kwako. Piga simu au tuandikie kwenda WhatsApp namba alama ya kujumulisha 2760552594 na tutakupigia simu.
Mtangazaji wa habari zetu za Afrika Kusini mjini Johannesburg.
Hivyo unaweza kuwa mshirika kwenye matangazo yetu. Sio mazungumzo tu, ni fursa yako ya kuchangia maoni yako na kushirikiana na jumuiya ya wasikilizaji wanaotamani mtazamo wako. Tufuate kwenye mitandao ya kijamii. Tembelea tovuti yetu www.channelafrica.co.za na uwe tayari kushiriki na kuchangia maoni yako kwenye Channel Africa. Channel Africa, mtazamo wa Kiafrika.
New day, new stories. Start your morning right with Rise and Shine on Channel Africa.
6:21 Central African time it is. Let's take a look now at some of the stories making headlines within the West African region. We're joined by our resident analyst. On Wednesdays, we speak to political analyst and conflict resolution, Dr. David Matsanga. Dr. Matsanga, how are you today?
Thank you very much. I'm very sorry. The time here in Netherlands confused me, and here I am. But I have come. I am ready to talk, to go without any hesitation. Good morning, Asanda.
And we appreciate you making time for us. Let's start with Ghana today. So the country has entered into a memorandum of understanding with the Africa Tourism Research Network. And what exactly will this entail, this agreement between the two?
This will boost a lot of tourism across the continent and in Ghana. As you know, Ghana is my favorite spot across the continent of Africa. Anytime when I have time, free time, I go to Ghana. Ghana, it has good conditions. It has got facilities for allowing people to come in, any black African, any African, black, white, yellow. If you have an African passport, you are welcome in Ghana, as long as you don't have anything criminal that you intended to do. It's a great place. It increases tourism across Africa. It also cements unity among tourist agencies that will be handling these matters in Africa and elsewhere. That is a great move for Ghana.
Are there any time frames that have been put on this agreement? And if there's funding that's confirmed, where will it come from?
The funding comes from tourism itself. And first of all, local money will be pumped in, investors will come in, and also from International Tourist Association, World Tourist Organization. These are some of the projects that need peace. And as you know, Ghana is in that peninsula of West Africa. Ghana is the only country that is so peaceful. Therefore, funding will come from private investors, from the government, from foreign investors. Several people are coming in, and I think that is the best way to do business nowadays in Africa.
So from your favorite country on the continent to your least favorite, let's go to Nigeria now, where there are discussions around security challenges in the country with America. And this after the president of the U.S., Donald Trump, had said that, or has accused the country of atrocities and killings against Christians, saying that he's going to attack with the military. And these killings allegedly being carried out by jihadists. What are the chances of a collaboration on security concerns between the two nations of the America and Nigeria?
I think there is no love anymore between the two states because there are two different states. One harbors terrorists, one is a government full of terrorists. The vice president himself is a member of part of the Boko Haram that disturbs the entire region. Tinubu himself is more or less, he doesn't care. He doesn't care about Christians being slaughtered. He did not show enough emotions. He did not show anything that is sympathetic. A state of a quagmire state, a collapsed country, a failed country, a country hotbed of terrorism. That's why I'm here in Netherlands. I am here because of Nigeria, not because of anything. I am here trying to find a solution with some other international and African regional leaders. We are trying to find a solution. How long can we go on having a country that is breeding terrorists, that is sending us on the dead bodies across, that is sending us abducted people, that does not listen to orders at all? Nigeria is a country where no court order can be listened to. It kidnaps people. It abducts people. It kills people. It has abducted so many people. It has abducted one gentleman from another country in Africa, taken him there. This country in Africa said, return that man. You came at night, skillfully took this guy. We want him back in court. If he has got a problem in our country, we shall try him and then send him back to you. So Nigeria is not a country I should speak about. In fact, you spoil my morning when you bring this state. It is collapsed, it's gone. It's a problem of Africa with everything inside it.
Let's shift then so that your morning isn't too spoiled. But we're going to Benin now, where the country has signed off on constitutional amendments that will extend the presidential term there from 5 to 7 years. We know the current president, Talui, won't really be that affected by this. He's only got 6 months left in power. But for those general elections of 2026 that the country will be embarking on, what does this mean, do you think?
He wants another one. Not to be affected. My dear sister, that is now the disease of Africa. The disease of Africa is we have lost it. I don't think Africa can manage one man, one vote. Let's go back, Asanda, to drawing table. Africa is the most complicated things when it comes to elections. You have seen elections across Africa everywhere. People are not able to consider elections. They go into these elections. Some of them want to go into these elections without even signing any document, any rules, like that guy in Tanzania, Tundu Lissu. He just wants to come and say, I want to win an election. He has got rules. Therefore, listen, all these extensions, change of extensions of constitutions, it's happening everywhere, almost in Africa. Every sitting president wants to extend his term because they reach there, they commit so many things. Some of them are not fulfilled. Some of them are very bad. They fear how to go. So Africa needs to create a culture of where we live with serving presidents. If he has committed a crime, leave him to go and sit. We must introduce that type of immunity in our clauses of the Constitution. Some of the things that make presidents stick to power is we threaten them, that if you leave power, we shall bring you to jail. Look at what happened in Zambia between Kiruba and Lungu. These are some of the things that make some sitting presidents fear. Today I'm very humble, I'm very balanced. That's why I am saying everywhere in Africa, Constitution, look at Zimbabwe. Are you not seeing what is going on there? Near you there. The only country in Africa that sticks to its mandate, South Africa, Ghana, those have stuck to their mandate. Now look at what is happening in the Senegal. The two men are fighting. Very soon the army could come in or they can be separated by some other force. Africa, we need to go back to Renaissance.
As we talk of Senegal and we speak of changes to governance there, the President Bassirou Diomaye Faye and his Prime Minister Ousmane Sonko are not seeing eye to eye. There are some cracks there in their relationship as a result of President Faye unilaterally making changes to the coalition there. What exactly were these changes that Sonko is not happy about?
Sonko this position that Faye occupies is Sonko's. Yes, and let's be honest. And in Africa, even God can be very upset with you. Sonko said, Faye, you go ahead. I'm in prison. Go ahead. Don't worry. Go ahead and be the president. And then Faye is French. He has followed the French policies that are not working. that every leader, younger person in that region is abandoning. Sonko wants real changes, real reforms, real stoppage of corruption, nepotism. That is what Sonko is. I've tried to mediate that conflict between the two. Remember, he was very instrumental, talking every day on South African television, your radio here, about their release from prison. They have disappointed me. They don't want to see eye to eye. I have tried to write to them letters. I think I will leave it. Whoever wins now, the elephant, who is going to suffer. Let's see. But the situation is not very good in Senegal at all.
Dr. Matsanga, we'll leave it there for today, and thanks again for your time.
Thank you very much, my sister. The time, or the international time confused me, and I ended up not seeing, but I hope I've done something better. But remind you that let's be careful about external forces that cause trouble. International NGOs that have caused trouble for South Africa, AfriForm, for example. Here in Tanzania, there are external forces that are trying to dismember this country. Africans, please remember me. Remember me. We must stand firm against such external dark forces. Good morning.
Dr. Matsanga, thanks so much for your time. Political analyst and conflict resolution there. Dr. Matsanga giving us stories making headlines in the West African region of our continent. Let's say good morning to Onele Nzinzi now. She has our news headlines. It's 6:31.
SABC News. Headlines. The African Perspective.
Thank you, Asanda. Human Rights Watch has published a report indicating that over 30 people have been killed in attacks in 2 villages in Mali's central Segou region by the country's military and allied militias. The report reveals that the first attack occurred last month in the village of Kamona, where the army and militia forces killed at least 21 men. Tanzanian President Samia Suluhu Hassan says the country's image for stability has been stained by the unrest that hit the East African nation during last month's heavily disputed elections. Speaking as she swore in her new cabinet, Samia warned that the violence could set the country back. And the Israeli military says it struck Hamas militants who it said were carrying out training in a Palestinian refugee camp in Lebanon. Channel Africa News, I am Onele Nzinzi.
SABC News. Headlines. The African Perspective.
Right, let's catch you up and find out what's been happening in the world of sport. And for a first look on the program today, we say good morning to Rachel Musibudi Makura.
Sports on Channel Africa. The African Perspective.
Thank you so much, Peter Ndoro. We'll start with what happened overnight. ASEC Mimosas continued their historic debut challenge in the CAF Women's Champions League by edging FC Masra 1-0 in a tightly contested semi-final on Tuesday night at the Suez Canal Stadium in the city of Ismailia in Egypt, a result that subsequently secured their place in the tournament's grand finale. So after a balanced and as well as a cagey first half, the breakthrough finally arrived in the second half. The decisive moment came in the 73rd minute when 22-year-old forward Essie Dagba produced and gave ASEC Mimosas the all-important lead, then sent them through to the final. That result now crowns a remarkable journey for ASEC Mimosas, who have reached the final in their debut appearance of the competition. Awaiting them in the final is former champions, AS FAR of Morocco, a side now determined to reclaim the title that they lifted previously. So AS FAR, by the way, booked their place in the final of the Total Energies Women's Champions League after defeating defending champions TP Mazembe of the Democratic Republic of Congo in a tense goalless encounter that was ultimately decided from the penalty spot also on Tuesday night. That result not only sends the Moroccan Giants through, but also serves as a fitting revenge for last season's finale, where Mazembe emerged victorious. The deadlock persisted throughout the 90 minutes, sending the match into extra time and then the lottery of penalties. It was the Moroccan side who went on to win 4-2 on penalties. So the final of the Women's Champions League will be played on Friday. That's Friday, of course, the 21st of November, where Continental Glory awaits the winner. Back home now, goalkeeper of the South African women's football team, Kaylin Swart, has admitted the protracted contract talks between coach Desiree Ellis as well as the South African Football Association did cause a bit of uncertainty within the team. So Ellis was a notable absentee in the recent camp as they made a final push to qualify for the 2026 Women's Africa Cup of Nations tournament, with assistant coach Tina Sonkembuli leading them to a 2-1 aggregate win to book their tickets. Now, Swart says that they did their best as senior players to shield the young players from the tension and uncertainty.
Discomfort, no. Just a little bit of uncertainty of whether, she's coming back or we get a new coach. But we never focused on that. We always focused on ourselves, and we made sure that, the senior leadership group, we try to really do our part to try and, shield the younger ones from any of the difficulties of understanding what was going on. And I think we did a really good job. So I must give credit to us as a leadership group for really stepping up and, making sure that the younger ones knew that we always had them no matter what.
On to this now. Hugo Bruce, the head coach of the South African men's national football team, Bafana, has ruled out scheduling any additional friendly matches before the squad departs for next month's Africa Cup of Nations tournament in Morocco. So South Africa will face Angola, Egypt, as well as Zambia in the group. Bruce is expected now to announce his final 23-man squad in the first week of December ahead of the pre-tournament camp in Tshwane. That's in the capital city, Pretoria. So when asked if he might add more fixtures following the 3-1 win over Zambia in Gqeberha in the Eastern Cape province this past weekend, Bruce dismissed the idea, calling it unnecessary.
No, we will play one game, and I don't like to play 1 or 2 or 3 games before we go. We played enough against African teams, so we don't have to play against another African team because we don't know African football. We played the last 4 years nearly only against African teams. So we don't have to play another 2 or 3 games before we go to AFCON. That is... No, we don't need that.
And finally, in some rugby news, Springbok powerhouse Oxen Chair has become the first prop to be nominated for the World Rugby Player of the Year award, which was introduced back in 2001. And Chair is one of 4 nominees announced for the 2025 award on Tuesday, joining Bok teammates Peter Steph de Toy, as well as Malcolm Marx, as well as France wing Louis Bele-Bari. It is also the second nomination for Marx, who made the shortlist back in 2018. Hookissa featured before with Ireland, as well as the British and the Irish Lions icon Keith Wood winning the inaugural award back in 2001. Now, Steve Thompson of England won it in 2003, Dan Collins of New Zealand won it in 2016, and Joe Taufute of the USA in 2019 were also shortlisted in their respective seasons. But until now, no prop had cracked the nomination list. On that historic note, that's a wrap from the Sports Desk at the Sawa. For any sports stories you'd like to share with us, remember to send us an email to newsroom@channelafrica.co.za. Give us a call as well on +27 11714 4459. I'm back with more sports news in the next hour. For Channel Africa Sport, I am Musibu D. Makura.
Sports on Channel Africa. The African Perspective.
Mix Vibration sur Channel Africa.
Qu'est-ce qui vous a amené à dire ça? Est-ce que vous avez observé un certain nombre d'événements dans la vie? Est-ce que c'était par rapport à une expérience? Est-ce que vous avez rencontré des choses qui vous ont dit il faut de la patience, comme ça les choses vont venir au bon moment et les bons dieux pourra peut-être me visiter?
Oui, c'était justement un conseil que le Seigneur m'a fait inspirer pour donner à son peuple, parce qu'il y a la plupart des gens, pendant que Dieu bénit les autres, ils pensent que Dieu les a oubliés, et pendant que Dieu ouvre pour pour les autres, ils pensent que peut-être Dieu n'a pas pu écouter leurs prières. Alors, ce n'est pas le cas. Alors, Dieu bénit tout un chacun de nous avec son temps. Donc, le temps de Dieu est toujours le meilleur dans la vie de tout un chacun de nous.
Mix Vibration, tous les dimanches de 18h à 19h, temps universel.
So let's catch up with what's happening in the world of business. We get our first full update today on this Wednesday. Here's Buntle Headbush.
Business news on Channel Africa. The African Perspective.
Thanks, Asanda, and a very good morning to our listeners. In our top story this hour, President Cyril Ramaphosa has assured corporate South Africa that it has the support of government in its efforts to establish trade and investment opportunities throughout the continent. He urged the business community to continue to innovate and strengthen its trading capacity despite the challenging environment. Ramaphosa was addressing the G20 Chief Executives Working Dinner hosted by Investec and sponsored by the Industrial Development Corporation in Sandton.
The implementation of the African Continental Free Trade Area will profoundly transform market access for South African goods, services and investments. It will help to drive regional integration and value chains across borders. It will expand opportunities for businesses to access a wider African market of about 1.4 billion people at the moment and rising even more when we reach 2.5 billion people, and currently with a combined GDP of $3.4 trillion.
Meanwhile, the chairperson of the Industrial Development Corporation, Gloria Serobe, has emphasized that the state-owned development funder remains committed to accelerating industrialization across the African continent. She emphasized that driving structural transformation from primary production to value-added manufacturing is an important element of the IDC's continental strategy. Serobe was also addressing the G20 Chief Executives Working Dinner hosted by Investec and Sandton.
We aim to build competitive regional value chains in sectors such as energy, agro-processing, automotive and green technologies, creating jobs, driving innovation and ensuring Africa's voice is strong in global markets. We believe that Africa's prosperity will be driven by collaboration between governments, business leaders and development institutions.
As the race to access critical minerals intensifies, South Africa plans to take the G20 Critical Minerals Framework to the world. Mineral and Petroleum Resources Minister Beda is urging countries on the continent to unite behind its minerals. The department, in partnership with the United Nations Development Programme, hosted the G20 Africa Critical Minerals Partnership Engagement in Sandton, Johannesburg. Minister Mandashe says the continent must move from being primarily an exporter of raw minerals to becoming a key player in value-added production and supply chain integration.
We should never be entering the world as a continent, as individual countries. We are 54 countries. If we go to the world as 54 countries, we are very weak. But if we go there and try to have a uniform approach as a continent, we are very powerful and we can be influential.
A global internet outage linked to web infrastructure giant Cloudflare is starting to ease. However, many major online platforms are still experiencing disruptions. Cloudflare, which handles about 20% of the world's web traffic, says a major internal systems failure this morning left thousands of users unable to access popular sites, including X and ChatGPT, Prabhashini Moodley reports.
The company says it is working to fix the problem, however warns some users may still face problems as systems recover. The company runs one of the largest networks designed to keep websites stable and protect them from heavy traffic and cyber attacks. On its homepage, X is displaying a message for some users saying there is a problem with its internal server as a result of an error originating with Cloudflare.
The Reserve Bank of Zimbabwe says reserves backing the Zimbabwe gold currency have grown by nearly 9% to $980 million. RBZ's Director of Economic Research, Modeling and Policy, Nepson Mubunga, says the central bank is well on its way to meet some of those conditions necessary for a monocurrency regime as dictated in Statutory Instrument 218 of 2023. Mupunga says the Reserve Bank hopes to hit the $1 billion in terms of reserves by the end of the year. And now taking a look at the indicators, $1 in Nigeria is trading at 1,445 naira this morning. In Botswana, it's at 13 pula 87. Kenya, the dollar is trading at 128 shilling 71. And Zambia, it's at 22 kwacha 70. Moving to the BRICS countries, $1 in Brazil is trading at 5 real 32. Russia, 81 rubles 11. India, 88 rupees 57. And China, 7 yuan 10. And South Africa, $1 is trading at 17 rand 19 cents this morning. It's a bit down from yesterday morning. $1 is trading at 76 pence to the British pound and 86 to the euro. Looking at commodities, gold is trading at $4,075 per ounce, platinum at $1,542 per ounce, both up from yesterday, while the price of Brent crude oil is also a bit higher at $64.66 a barrel. And those are your business news. I'll be back with another update in the next hour. For any business news stories you'd like to share with us, please send an email to newsroom@channelafrica.co.za or give us a call on +27 11 714 4459. For Channel Africa Business, I'm Bontle Headbush.
Business News on Channel Africa. The African Perspective. Wake up, Africa. Peter Ndoro and Asanda Beda are here to help you rise and shine. Weekdays, 6 till 9 a.m. Central African Time. Only on Channel Africa. G20 in Africa. Exclusive to Channel Africa.
Now, did you know that the African Union, as the 21st member of the G20 at the 2023 summit in India, was officially represented at the 2024 summit in Brazil, and that in its 2009 summit, the G20 declared itself the primary venue for international economic and financial cooperation. And that's our G20 fact for this morning.
G20 in Africa. Exclusive to Channel Africa. Championing Africa through solidarity, equality, and sustainability.
As International Fraud Awareness Week and experts say online scams are rising worldwide as criminals use artificial intelligence and stolen personal data to deceive consumers. Cyber breaches, identity fraud and sophisticated impersonation scams are expanding across the global digital economy. Channel Africa's Lebuchang Mabange reports.
Across the world, people are facing a surge in digital fraud, fueled by easier access to personal information and new AI-powered tools that make scams harder to detect. Dr. Jerry Cherry, head of business integrity at Santam, says cyber criminals are becoming increasingly advanced.
Fraudulent scams are on the increase. The reason for the increase is because of the readily available personal information which is available on the dark web due to the numerous cyber breaches we see happening every day. Further, fraudsters are starting to use AI tools to perpetrate fraudulent scams. They use AI tools to draft legitimate-looking messages to entice victims to share personal information.
He says one of the fastest growing threats globally is impersonation fraud, where criminals use stolen identities to open accounts or create false credit records.
An example of a fraudulent scam is an impersonation. An impersonation is used to create credit records or open accounts on unsuspecting victims. As we go into the festive season, I anticipate these fraudulent scams will increase. Victims normally become less vigilant as we go into the festive season, and that is when fraudsters are most rife in terms of perpetrating the frauds.
Cherry warns that scammers use emotional pressure to force victims into revealing sensitive details.
There are various different types of frauds, for example, holiday scams, pet scams, and so forth. I urge consumers to be extra vigilant in terms of sharing information over the phone, and you will note a recent trend where the fraudster who's making the call exercises pressure on the unsuspecting victim in terms of telling them that they are going to lose vast sum of money if they do not share the information. I urge victims that when you receive such calls to cut the call immediately and rather contact the bank directly. Do not share any personal information telephonically.
He adds that fraudsters often create crisis scenarios to manipulate people into acting quickly.
Fraudsters also use crisis scenarios by informing unsuspecting victims that the fraudster is actively stealing money of their accounts and urge and force the victims to share this information. We should never share information over the phone.
With scams becoming increasingly global and sophisticated, experts say staying vigilant, especially around the holidays, is critical. With Black Friday also around the corner, consumers are advised to avoid pressure tactics, verify all unexpected calls, and never share personal information with strangers. Reporting for Channel Africa, I am Lebogang Mabange in Johannesburg, South Africa.
The conference on how organized crime is evolved in Africa is underway in Nairobi in Kenya. The two-day conference, which began on Monday, brings together stakeholders and experts to consider trends in criminality and the impact of policy responses. The conference is co-hosted by the Institute for Security Studies, the ISS, the Global Initiative Against Transnational Organized Crime, and also Interpol. CC has this report.
The two-day conference reflects on the work by ENAC project by the European Union, which has been working to enhance Africa's capacity to counter and respond to organized crime through analysis, engagement, technical assistance, training and convening of key counterparts. Throughout the program, these activities supported policymakers, law enforcement and civil society practitioners to develop informed interventions that tackle the threat of organized crime on the continent. However, transnational organized crime remains a serious and complex threat to governance, security and development in Africa. Executive Director of Global Initiative Against Transnational Organized Crime, Dr. Mark Shaw, is part of the conference and shares some of the achievement of the project.
And what ENACT has shown is that firstly, there's an enormous diversity of illicit markets and criminal operations across the African continent. There's a strong linkage to violence and instability, and indeed the terminology that we were using seemed inadequate to the task when we began, and that mafia-like structures are deeply embedded in states across the continent. And I, as a South African, would never have anticipated what is ongoing now in South Africa, which is a series of commissions and engagements precisely on the connection between organized crime and politics. And while it's traumatic to watch, it's also a sign of a democracy coming to terms with the degree of illicit penetration into its institutions and into its democratic processes.
Former chair of the International Council of Transparency International, John Kidongo's topic was on the evolving role of state-embedded actors driving organized crime in Africa. He lauded the ENACT project, saying it has the most accessible, quality research on organized crime in Africa. Kitongo reflects on the evolving role of state-embedded actors driving organized crime in Africa.
What's unique about this report is that yet once again, the state-embedded actors continue to be central to organized crime in Africa. And this is despite the fact that over the last 40 to 50 years, we've seen a gradual improvement of all circumstances, economic and political as well. This generation of Africans are the wealthiest over the last 80 years, the healthiest over the last 100, and the most educated. And yet, we continue to have these challenges that have been described so well in this report. The challenge, though, is that even as things are today, criminality that is fed by generalized governance failures produces a situation that the report disassembles extremely well, where the distinction between political leadership in some of our countries and criminals too easily becomes hazy.
Head of Interpol Regional Bureau Nairobi, Africa Apollo, highlighted that organized crime in Eastern Africa is diverse and multifaceted, ranging from east to commodity trafficking, including drugs, firearms, fraud and fauna, mineral resources, and even humans, including financial and cyber crimes. Therefore, it was not surprising for ENECT Organized Crime Index to rank the region as number 1 in terms of criminality. He called for more investment in efforts to address instability and criminality in the region.
Partnership for us is not a choice. It is a crucial part of our strategy to address the complex dynamics in this region. Under ENACT project, for the past more than 8 years, we have witnessed an intensification not only in the organization of joint events, but also in the generation and dissemination of knowledge and skills. The work of ENACT has improved policing in our region and strengthened the capabilities of YEPCO member countries to address terrorism. I would echo what the previous speaker talked about, women action, strengthening of capacities, not leaving behind our female officers. Through its evidence-based research on human trafficking and smuggling, its exploitation of natural resources, including our lakes, forests, and mineral resources, cattle rustling, drugs, vehicle theft, and illicit trade in sandalwood, and many other groundbreaking studies, ENACT brought to the forefront some of the critical and undercutting organized crime issues in the region.
The conference ends on Tuesday. For Channel Africa, I'm Sisi Sekhalo in Johannesburg, South Africa.
Okay, so today in history, fascinating things happened. Some of them not so good, unfortunately. We've got a difficult history on the continent. 1967, Nigerian Civil War. So reports started emerging today internationally of mass killings of civilians in Asaba in Nigeria. And this was during the early stages of the Biafra War, drawing global attention to the humanitarian toll of the conflict. So that was 1967. In 1994, the Angola peace efforts are starting to move forward. The Lusaka Protocol was formally approved by the UN Security Council, and this marked a key step towards ending Angola's 19-year civil war between the MPLA government and UNITA rebels. And also on this day, 2017, Zimbabwe's long-serving president, Robert Mugabe, agreed to step down after 37 years in power, days after a military takeover marking the end of an era in Southern African politics. So he resigned today, although some people said, look, it was all-out coup d'etat, so he was forced out in the end. Robert Mugabe, his party, celebrating his exit. And that began the era of Emerson Mnangagwa.
2017 wasn't that long ago, but it feels like it was.
Yeah,
it feels like such a long time
ago. I remember that day so well. There was so much joy on the streets, people celebrating. And, you know, I think they weren't paying attention to what was coming, but celebrating what was outgoing. And yeah.
Were you in the UK or were you here in the country at that time?
No, I was in Zimbabwe and I was in studio, and I remember it was one of those rolling stories that just went on for days. But on the day itself, it was quite an incredible thing to see soldiers with citizens, and because normally the fight between these two was always quite severe. That you look at a soldier and you immediately get scared and want to run away. But there were scenes across the country, jubilation at the end of this.
It would be interesting to see or get an account in terms of what the diaspora was saying about it, because we know what Zim was saying.
Everybody was excited.
Zimbabweans in South Africa were saying.
Everybody was
excited.
That's why
I asked if you were still in the UK at the time.
No, I was here actually, and everybody was excited, and there were thoughts about going home. But those that were older, like me, would remember that Emerson Mnangagwa actually was the head of national security when he went into Matabeleland and did the Gukrahundi massacres. So we knew him, and most people feared him more than Mugabe. But anyway.
From Africa's broadcast capital to the furthest corners of the globe, this is Rise and Shine, every weekday mornings on Channel Africa.
It's 7 o'clock Central African time. We now enter the second hour of Rise and Shine. Good morning. If you've just joined us, I'm Asanda Beda. Connect with us at Channel Africa 1 is our handle throughout our various social media platforms. www.channelafrica.co.za is our website where you can also connect with us. Of course, we live streaming via YouTube as well.
Right, and coming up on the program, by the way, I'm Peter Ndoro. Coming up in this hour, we'll be taking a look at a number of things. An interesting report by Amnesty International talking about how Kenya deployed some sophisticated digital tools and technology to suppress youth-led protests in 2024 and 2025. I guess you have to fight with the weapons that are available to you, but all it means is suppressing democracy and freedom of speech. And we'll be exploring what's in that report and some of the tricks that the Kenyan government... Is there something else that you'll be looking at?
Surprise, fresh fighting.
Oh, dear.
Has broken out. Between guess who? The DRC government and the M23 rebels. Literally 3 days ago we were saying they've signed another new deal. Here we are again.
All right, so we'll be unpacking those stories and more after the news with Onele Nsinsi, as well as the sports headlines with Musibudi Makura.
SABC News. The African Perspective.
Thank you, Peter. Human Rights Watch has published a report indicating that at least over 30 people have been killed in attacks on 2 villages in Mali's central Segou region by the country's military and allied militias. The report reveals that the first attack occurred last month in the village of Kamona, where the army and militia forces killed at least 21 men and burnt homes. Witnesses have described the army and militia forces executing villagers after accusing them of collaborating with an extremist group. Tanzania's President Samia Suluhu Hassan says the country's image for stability has been stained by the unrest that hit the East African nation during last month's heavily disputed election. Speaking as she swore in her new cabinet, Samia warned that the violence could set the country back. She was declared winner of the October presidential poll with 98% of the vote. The opposition, which was barred from contesting, denounced the election as a mockery of democracy. Meanwhile, Lazarus Chakwera, Malawi's former president and the Commonwealth envoy, are due to arrive in Tanzania to lead reconciliation efforts between the two sides. South Africa's Chief of Staff in the Police Ministry, Cedric Nkabinde, is back again before the ad hoc committee today. The committee is probing allegations made by the KwaZulu-Natal Province Police Commissioner Nhlanhla Mkhwanazi of criminal infiltration, corruption and political interference in the justice system. Nkabinde was said packing last week after he admitted that he thumb-sucked some of his testimony relating to Police Minister Senzo Mchunu and Northwest businessman Brian Mahotsi. Committee Chairperson Malapi Lakhanyane explains.
Mr. Cedric Nkabinde will come back. The proceedings are at Good Hope Chambers. And then the head of procurement at the SAPS, Lieutenant General Dimpane Fani, will be coming on Thursday. So there was also other proposal that General Msikidi must come on Friday.
The Southern African Development Community has launched its 5-year communication awareness and visibility strategy in Botswana's capital city, Gaborone. The strategy was approved by SADC Council of Ministers in August this year during a meeting held in Antananarivo, Madagascar, ahead of the 45th Ordinary Summit of Heads of States and Government. SADC's Deputy Executive Secretary for Regional Integration, Angela Makombo-Ntumba, says the strategy is meant to foster the telling of stories to promote regional integration.
The communication, awareness, and visibility strategy 2025-2030 that is designed to enhance public understanding of SADC's mandate, priorities, and impact, and leverage multiple platforms to reach diverse audiences across member states. This strategy embraces our region's rich diversity, linguistic, cultural, and social, and ensures inclusivity for women, youth, persons with disabilities.
And lastly, the Israeli military says it struck Hamas militants who it said were carrying out training in a Palestinian refugee camp in Lebanon. The health ministry in Lebanon said at least 13 people were killed and several others wounded. The BBC's Hugo Bachega.
Footage posted online showed ambulances rushing through the narrow streets of the crowded refugee camp as a huge plume of smoke billowed from the location hit. Initial reports say the attack struck an area outside a mosque that is usually busy at night. Palestinian factions are known to be present in the camp. The Israeli military said the alleged compound that was attacked was used by Hamas members for training and exercises in order to plan and carry out attacks against Israel. He has provided no evidence to support the claims.
Channel Africa News, I'm Onele Nzinzi.
SABC News. The African Perspective.
And coming up in your sports news this hour, celebration as ASEC Mimosas will face off with AS FAR in the final of the CAF Women's Champions League this Friday, while 4 Springboks nominated for the prestigious World Player of the Year award. Details at 7:30.
Wake up, Africa. Peter Ndoro and Asanda Beda are here to help you rise and shine. Weekdays, 6 till 9 a.m. Central African Time. Only on Channel Africa.
Fresh fighting has broken out in the east of the Democratic Republic of Congo just days after representatives of the government and the M23 rebels signed a framework for peace in the Qatari capital of Doha. Authorities say the rebels have seized a strategic village in South Kivu province that has routes connecting to different parts of eastern Congo. SABC correspondent Chris Ochamringa has more from Kinshasa.
The Congolese army says the M23 rebels carried out a surprise attack on their positions in the territory of Shabunda over the weekend. After hours of fighting, the rebels took control of the village of Maimingi in the country's east. Violent clashes are still going on between the warring parties in the mineral-rich region of South Kivu province. The clashes come 2 days after representatives of the DRC government and the rebels signed a framework for peace in Qatar. The framework is supposed to establish a ceasefire, prisoner exchanges, and the restoration of state authority in the rebel-held areas, among 5 other key points. Earlier this year, the M23 rebels captured the eastern DRC city of Goma and Bukavu. The DRC government and UN experts accused Rwanda of deploying more than 6,000 soldiers to fight alongside the rebels to seize the cities. But Rwanda denied the accusation and blamed the DRC for supporting a Hutu militia known as FDLR that seeks to destabilize its government. The US and Qatar are trying to secure a peace deal, but their efforts have not been successful so far. Thousands of people have been killed and millions displaced since the fighting began in late 2021. Chris Ochamringa, SABC News, Kinshasa.
A new report from Amnesty International Kenya, titled "This Fear, Everyone is Feeling It," reveals how Kenyan authorities deployed digital tools and technology to suppress youth-led protests between 2024 and 2025. According to the report, young activists, particularly Generation Z or Generation Z demonstrators, encountered online harassment, disinformation campaigns, surveillance, and in some cases, offline violence and disappearances. The protests sparked by proposed tax hikes and deeper frustrations are estimated to have resulted in hundreds of deaths, thousands of arrests, and numerous enforced disappearances. Well, joining us now to discuss the findings and their implications is Victor Ndede, who's the head of programs at Amnesty International Kenya. Victor, thank you very much indeed for joining us, and welcome to the program.
Thank you very much for the invitation, and looking forward to speak about this report.
So, Victor, let's start with what prompted Amnesty International to look specifically at technology-facilitated repression of young protesters in Kenya.
So what prompted us to look at the tech-facilitated violence against activists and human rights defenders in Kenya was the growth of and the use of digital tools in protest mobilization, funding, protest campaign funds, and basically the mobilization of the protests through digital tools. And so given that the protests were Gen Z-led, there was a lot of deployment of digital technologies to support and aid the protests. And so in so doing, we saw a lot of clamp down on the digital space. Basically, government trying to clamp down on activism on the digital platforms just by looking at how much the digital platforms had really helped in getting the protests to what they are. If you look at the June 2024 protests in 2024 and also the June 2025 protests, the digital tools played a really critical role in organizing, mobilization, and even the crowdfunding that was supporting the protesters. And this is what really prompted us to look at what had actually happened on Kenya's digital spaces.
So, yes, for sure, these platforms assisted the protesters to get organized, get their message across. But at the same time, I guess some digital channels were actually being used against the activists. Take us through some concrete examples about how these channels and this online harassment took place.
So what we saw was online harassment on X platform, or what was formerly Twitter, and it took majorly three forms. So there was online harassment of human rights activists, which was mostly coordinated by what we found in the research to be networked pro-government disinformation actors or bloggers and social media users that were really linked to the government and state circles who were used to harass, target, and intimidate activists. And these attacks did not just end with activists. These attacks also went on to attack civil society organizations. And we saw tags like evil society, anarchists, and all those names that were given to civil society actors and human rights defenders. And so that was the first thing we saw. The other thing we saw in terms of how the digital platforms were utilized was an internet disruption. We saw the internet shut down, especially at the height of the protests in June 25th. And government, in full realization of how the internet was actually helping people access information, people coordinate their protests, people even crowdfund because of digital payment systems. They basically clamped down on the internet and rendered it unusable at the height of the protest on June 24th, which was also a critical moment for the Republic of Kenya. We also, in the report, acknowledged the use of surveillance and violations of the rights to privacy, in the sense that there were allegations from activists where they were surveilled, tracked, traced, and arrested based on what they had shared online or published online. And in some cases, some activists even wound up dead based on whatever they had posted online. And so that's how we saw how digital technology was being used as a means of state repression in the context of the Gen Z protest in 2024 and in 2025. There's also one other thing that we listed in the report that is not really related to the protest, but looks at some anecdotal evidence of how online harassment has worked in Kenya just before the protest. And here we looked at technology-facilitated gender-based violence, especially on activists who have previously worked on the areas around contraception, comprehensive sexual education in schools, and the pro-life, pro-choice debate. And we have seen a lot of them get attacked based on what is considered to be strong conservative religious views of certain groups. We saw the rise of that in the last couple of years, 3-4 years down the line, where activists who are pushing for, like pro-choice and those who are talking about comprehensive sexual education in schools got attacked. This also affected, of course, the LGBTI community. Thank you.
I think you also mentioned state government-linked networks such as 527 bloggers and coordinated campaigns of manipulation. Can you walk us through how those campaigns operate and the effects that these campaigns have on freedom of expression and protest space?
Yeah, so the 527, we basically call them the 527 bloggers, and the history of it or where it all starts is the fact that previously the bloggers used to be paid 527 Kenya shillings, which is roughly back then exchange was that's like $5, and the 27 shillings on top is the money that you're charged to withdraw that amount of money. So that's the birth or the origin of the 527 bloggers. And so what happens is these bloggers are organized into networks of like troll farms. Yeah, they exist in coordinated groups that are usually activated by state actors and even at times corporate actors to put an agenda online. And so in the case of the protests or the case of what we looked at in this research, we saw that these bloggers and social media users who are from the pro-government network were actually used to target human rights defenders online and basically attack, harass, and vilify them online for the work they were doing. And this, in effect, was coordinated campaigns targeted at specific individuals. And in the report, we highlight a couple of individuals who are targeted. We also highlight a couple of organizations, including Amnesty.
So your report, I think, drew some quite important conclusions and found some quite concerning situation in Kenya. I'm curious what your call is as Amnesty International as a result of what you found out. What's your call? Hello, are you still there? Okay, it looks like we may have lost Victor Ndede, who's the head of programs at Amnesty International Kenya, but I think he pretty much took us through these disturbing realities of modern day policing, I guess you can call it that, or control by the authorities. And that's the Kenyan government deploying digital tools and work online to suppress the protests and the youth movements in Kenya, the Gen Zs as they're known around the world now, in 2024 and 2025 in particular. Sadly, though, a lot of it also happened offline in terms of harassment, surveillance, and disappearances. And these happened in significant numbers. We'll leave that story there, though, but our thanks to Victor Ndede, Head of Programs at Amnesty International in Kenya.
Channel Africa is evolving, and so are you. Stay connected wherever you are with our brand new website and mobile app. Stream your favorite shows, catch up on African news, culture, and conversations, all at your fingertips.
Africa's just a tap away.
Your world, your stories, now on the go.
Stay connected wherever you are.
Visit channelafrica.co.za or download the Channel Africa app today. Channel Africa, the African perspective. New day, new stories. Start your morning right with Rise and Shine on Channel Africa.
At 20 minutes past, or just a little shy of 20 minutes past 7 Central African time, we take a look at this story now. French energy giant Total Energies is facing serious allegations of complicity in war crimes linked to a 2021 massacre near its multi-billion-dollar gas project in northern Mozambique. A complaint filed by the European Centre for Constitutional and Human Rights, or ECCHR, accuses the company of enabling abuses by Mozambican security forces who allegedly tortured and executed civilians near the Afungi gas site. Total Energies denies any responsibility for the actions of government troops deployed to protect the project. And joining us now to further discuss this is Chloe Bailey, who is Senior Legal Advisor for Business and Human Rights at the European Centre for Constitutional and Human Rights. Chloe, good morning to you. Thanks for making time.
Hi, good morning. Thanks for the invite to come and speak to you.
So what was the starting point then in terms of what prompted the European Centre for Constitutional and Human Rights, or ECCHR, to launch this investigation?
So our complaint is based on allegations that were reported over a year ago by Politico and Le Monde. And as you said, these investigations uncovered these atrocities that were allegedly committed against civilians. So following these revelations, the Mozambican authorities actually announced an investigation earlier this year. This has been accompanied by investigations by the Netherlands and the UK government that have provided finance to the LNG project. However, from our perspective, there has been no European judicial investigation into the role of Total Energy in particular. So that's why we filed this complaint.
What supports or what evidence supports your claim that the company was complicit when it comes to the war crimes?
So as I said, the complaint is based on publicly available information. So those two reports published last year. Then also what we have obtained is information about the relationship between Total Energy and the Mozambican government. Excuse me. So from 2020 until 2023, Total provided direct material and financial support to the Joint Task Force, which is a security force comprised of members of the Mozambican army. And this task force had the direct responsibility of providing security for the LNG facility. And it's members of this JTF that are alleged to have been involved in these atrocities committed against civilians. And then we have seen from internal company documents that Total Energy was actually aware that the Mozambican security forces had been accused of systematic human rights violations before the events at the containers, the events that form the basis of our complaint, took place. And there are multiple instances where the company was alerted about these abuses, but despite this knowledge, it continued its financial support.
How directly do you believe Total Energies operations enabled the abuses by Mozambican forces? I know you mentioned there in terms of the funding of the forces, but also how much power did Total Energies actually have in what seems like a governance or political issue?
Yeah, so if we look under French law, which given that this complaint has been filed in France, that's the most, obviously that's the law that we need to apply. It's sufficient to show for complicity that an accomplice to a crime had knowledge that the principal actor, so here the Joint Task Force or the Mozambican security forces, had committed or is about to commit a crime, and that with its aid or assistance, it facilitated the preparation or the commission of that crime. So from our perspective, providing support to the Joint Task Force, so this included providing food, providing accommodation, also providing bonuses for soldiers. This establishes a sufficient link between Total and the alleged crimes. And I think what's really important to mention that an independent report that was commissioned by Total a few years ago identified the financial link between the company and the Joint Task Force as potentially giving rise to legal responsibility when human rights violations occurred. And obviously, the really severe human rights violations occurred at its LNG facility. So that's the basis for why we are filing this complaint.
So what is the outcome then that the ECCHR is seeking from French prosecutors through this case?
So with this complaint, we are requesting that the French Specialized Prosecutor for War Crimes opens a preliminary investigation into the potential complicity of TotalEnergies. And then during the investigation, it's for the prosecutor to determine which actors might be implicated in the alleged crimes and then potentially to issue an indictment.
What's the response been so far as that's concerned? We know that also on the side of TotalEnergies, they've denied any responsibility.
Yes, I mean, that's unsurprising. And Total, when the allegations were first revealed last year, that was the response from TotalEnergies. I think we now just have to wait to see what the prosecutor does with the information that we have provided.
Failure to that, do you have a next avenue that you will seek?
At this stage, this is the primary thing that we are focusing on, at least with this case. But I think what is important to look at as well is the role of financial actors. So the financial actors, whether that's export credit agencies in the United Kingdom or the Netherlands, or also private banks that have been providing financial support for the project up until now. I think it's really, they should reflect on whether this project is something that they should continue to support.
Right, and on that, funders reflecting, how do you think this case should shape corporate accountability, especially when it comes to conflict zones globally?
So I think this case is really emblematic of the fact that companies operating in conflict zones, they're not neutral actors. So through their actions, they may contribute to the commission of grave human rights violations or indeed violations of international humanitarian law. And I think it's important to frame this case against the backdrop of other numerous examples of multinational companies that have been linked to crimes committed by security forces in conflict zones. And this is something that has occurred in the extractive industry in particular. But what I think the difference now is that slowly European courts are starting to recognize that when these are European companies or executives of these companies, they may be held legally responsible for these crimes. And an example of this, a case that is obviously much further along than ours, is the Lunden case in Sweden, where a trial is currently taking place against two former executives of a Swedish oil company for complicity in war crimes committed by the government in Sudan between 1999 and 2003. And I think these cases, even though currently they're still relatively rare, they should be seen as a wake-up call for companies to show that they can really no longer operate in conflict zones with impunity.
All right, Chloe, we'll leave it there, and thank you for enlightening us on this very important matter and for the work that you're doing and the bravery thereof.
Thank you so much.
Thanks. Chloe Bailey is Senior Legal Advisor for Business and Human Rights at the European Centre for Constitutional and Human Rights. So they've filed a complaint against Total Energy, the French energy giant, for atrocities and killings made in Mozambique under their watch. And Total is saying, no, we're not responsible.
Look, I mean, energy companies don't have a great reputation across the continent, particularly energy companies dealing with oil exploration. Nigeria, for example, Shell has been eventually taken to court and found guilty, found wanting. So it shouldn't surprise us because they have invested heavily in these oil wells, drills, and that kind of thing. And so whatever protection they can get, they will fund, I'm pretty sure. So, I mean, these are allegations. This is findings that they have made, but it'll be tested in court, and one hopes that the truth will come out.
Absolutely. 7:30 Central African Time. Let's get news headlines. Here's Onele Nzinzi.
SABC News. Headlines. The African Perspective.
Thank you, Asanda. Human Rights Watch has published a report indicating that over 30 people have been killed in attacks on 2 villages in Mali's central Segou region by the country's military and allied militias. The report reveals that the first attack occurred last month in the village of Kamona, where the army and militia forces killed at least 21 men. The Southern African Development Community has launched its 5-year communication, awareness and visibility strategy in Botswana's capital city, Gaborone. The strategy was approved by SADC Council of Ministers in August this year during a meeting held in Antananarivo in Madagascar. And the Israeli military says it struck Hamas militants who it said were carrying out training in a Palestinian refugee camp in Lebanon. Channel Africa News, I am Onele Nzinzi.
SABC News. Headlines. The African Perspective.
Right, it's time to find out what's happening in sports as we say good morning again to Musibudi Makura.
Sports on Channel Africa. The African Perspective.
Thank you so much, Peter. Very good morning once again from the sports desk. So AS FAR of Morocco have booked their place in the final of the Total Energies CAF Women's Champions League. This after defeating champions TP Mazembe in a very tense goalless encounter that was ultimately then decided from the penalty spot on Tuesday. The result not only sends the Moroccan Giants through, but also serves as a fitting revenge for last season's final where Mazembe from the DRC emerged victorious. The deadlock persisted through 90 minutes, sending the match to extra time, with the lottery of penalties then deciding who then goes into that final. Now, the Moroccan side went on to win 4-2 on penalties. This means now that the Total Energies Women's Champions League final will then take place this coming Friday, the 21st of November, with the winner, of course, likely either to be AS FAR or ASEC Mimosas, who went into the final this after defeating their rivals from the Egyptian side, FC Masra, by 1-0 to move into Friday's final. While Springbok powerhouse Oxen Chair has become the first prop to be nominated for the World Rugby Player of the Year, which was introduced back in 2001. Chair is one of the 4 nominees announced for the 2025 award on Tuesday, joining Bok teammates Peter Steve du Toit, as well as Malcolm Marx, as well as France wing Louis Bele-Bayari. It is also the second nomination for Marx, who made the shortlist back in 2018. Hookers have featured before with Ireland as well as British and the British and Irish Lions icon Keith Wood winning the inaugural award back in 2001, Steve Thompson of England in 2003, Dane Coles of New Zealand in 2016, as well as Joe Tafote of the USA in 2019 were also shortlisted in their respective seasons. Until now, no prop has ever cracked a nomination for the World Rugby Player of the Year. Still on rugby news, Ireland centre Robbie Henshaw believes their final Autumn Nations Series fixture against the world champion South Africa will be a proper test in terms of assessing just where the squad is at the moment. Now, Ireland suffered a dispiriting loss to New Zealand before a below-par victory over Japan, but then bounced back in a ruthless fashion last weekend when they recorded a 46-19 victory over Australia, with Henshaw scoring one of the 6 tries. So having won the rugby championship, South Africa are 3 from 3 in their November matches in the Northern Hemisphere. The Springboks meanwhile will look to claim a tour clean sweep in Dublin after victories over Japan at Wembley Stadium, France as well as Italy. Ireland meanwhile famously stunned South Africa in the group stages of the 2023 Rugby World Cup, and the two sides drew a summer series back in 2024. Onto this now. South Africa's road running star Ndoro Qaba is set to make a major decision as she prepares for what promises to be a jam-packed 2026 season. So her calendar is already overflowing with commitments such as the World Half Marathon, as well as the World Cross Country Championships, as well as the Commonwealth Games over and above her usual local calendar. On top of that, she hopes to run a major marathon, with Qaba now telling SABC Sport that she will need to make smart decisions sort of to manage exactly her demanding 2026 schedule.
Yes, I can love to be a more successful and more athlete that they can look to. But I have bigger goals also. But I can love to run Spar Ladies again. I'm looking forward to run it again, but I don't think I will do all of them. I will choose which ones that I need to focus on them. I think if I can do very well in first one is the one that will give me the idea that I need to complete all of them.
All right, so that concludes your sports news at this hour. For any sports stories you'd like to share with us, send us an email. That's to newsroom@channelafrica.co.za. Alternatively, call us on +27 11714 4459. I'm back with more sports news in the next hour. For Channel Africa Sport, I am Musibudi Makura.
Sports on Channel Africa. The African perspective. Ahoy, matey!
Captain here to help, right, boys?
Set sail with us on a digital voyage like no other. Channel Africa has a treasure trove of awesomeness. That is our website and social media pages.
Tell me, why are you here?
We want you to be part of our adventure.
The winds are changing, Captain. And this time...
Imagine a world where curiosity knows no bounds, where entertainment meets enlightenment, and where every click leads to the African perspective. Visit us on our website, www.channelafrica.co.za, or follow us on Instagram or on X at Channel Africa 1. Go on, like us on Facebook at Channel Africa 1. So, spread the word. Tell a friend that Channel Africa's online variety is what they need on the web. Channel Africa, the African perspective.
Right, let's find out what's happening in the world of business. Now we say good morning again to Wintle Headbush.
Business news on Channel Africa, the African perspective.
Thanks, Asanda. Good morning. Our top story, Gabon's government and a coalition of donors have signed an agreement aimed at protecting 34,000 square kilometers of the country's Congo Basin rainforests. Dubbed Gabon Infini, the plan will combine $94 million of donor money from the likes of Global Environment Facility and the Bezos Earth Fund, with $86 million of government funding over a 10-year period. It aims to finance new national parks, tackle elephant poaching, and boost ecotourism using what is known as a project finance for permanence model. This is an approach that binds a disbursement of funding to key government policy changes. This debt for nature swap model is gaining popularity, with Brazil announcing a similar agreement on Monday, covering nearly 243,000 square kilometers of the Amazon rainforest, while Kenya and Namibia are also in the process of finalizing deals. President Cyril Ramaphosa has assured corporate South Africa that it has the support of government in its efforts to establish trade and investment opportunities throughout the continent. He urged the business community to continue to innovate and strengthen its trading capacity despite the challenging environment. Ramaphosa was addressing the G20 Chief Executives Working Dinner hosted by Investec and sponsored by the Industrial Development Corporation in Sandton, north of Johannesburg.
The implementation of the African Continental Free Trade Area will profoundly transform market access for South African goods, services and investments. It will help to drive regional integration and value chains across borders. It will expand opportunities for businesses to access a wider African market of about 1.4 billion people at the moment, and rising even more when we reach 2.5 billion people, and currently with a combined GDP of $3.4 trillion.
Meanwhile, the chairperson of the Industrial Development Corporation, Gloria Serobe, has emphasized that the state-owned development funder remains committed to accelerating industrialization across the African continent. She emphasized that driving structural transformation from primary production to value-added manufacturing is an important element of the IDC's continental strategy. Serobe was also addressing the G20 Chief Executives Working Dinner hosted by Investec in Sandton.
We aim to build competitive regional value chains in sectors such as energy, agro-processing, automotive and green technologies, creating jobs, driving innovation, and ensuring Africa's voice is strong in global markets. We believe that Africa's prosperity will be driven by collaboration between governments, business leaders, and development institutions.
The Reserve Bank of Zimbabwe says reserves backing the Zimbabwe gold currency have grown by nearly 9% to $980 million. RBZ's Director of Economic Research, Modeling and Policy, Nipson Mupunga, says the central bank is well on its way to meet some of those conditions necessary for a monocurrency regime, as dictated in Statutory Instrument 218 of 2023. Mupunga says the Reserve Bank's hopes to hit the $1 billion mark in terms of reserves by the end of the year. A global internet outage linked to web infrastructure giant Cloudflare is starting to ease. However, many major online platforms are still experiencing disruptions. Cloudflare, which handles about 20% of the world's web traffic, says a major internal systems failure this morning left thousands of users unable to access popular sites, including X and ChatGPT. Bashni Moodley reports.
The company says it is working to fix the problem, however warns some users may still face problems as systems recover. The company runs one of the largest networks designed to keep websites stable and protect them from heavy traffic and cyber attacks. On its homepage, X is displaying a message for some users saying there is a problem with its internal server as a result of an error originating with Cloudflare.
And now time for a look at the indicators. This morning, $1 in Nigeria is trading at 1,445 naira. In Botswana, it's 13 pula 87. Kenya, the dollar is trading at 128 shillings 71. And in Zambia, it's 22 kwacha 70. The BRICS countries, $1 in Brazil is trading at 5 real 32 this morning. Russia, 81 rubles 11. In India, it's 88 rupees 57. China 7110, and South Africa $1 is trading at 17 rand 19 cents this morning. $1 is trading at 76 pence to the British pound and 86 to the euro. Looking at commodities, gold is trading at $4,075 per ounce, platinum at $1,542 per ounce, while the price of Brent crude oil is $64.66 a barrel. And those are your business news. For any business stories you'd like to share with us, please send an email to newsroom@channelafrica.co.za or give us a call on +2711 714 4459. For Channel Africa Business, I am Bontle Headbush.
Business news on Channel Africa. The African perspective. New day, new stories. Start your morning right with Rise and Shine on Channel Africa.
Let's take a look at this particular story now as we come from the world of business there with an update from Bontle Headbush. We talk the Secretary General of the African Continental Free Trade Area, Wamkele Mene, saying Africa must mobilize its own domestic capital if it hopes to effectively address the rising cost of borrowing and drive investment on the continent. Speaking at the Bloomberg Africa Business Summit taking place in Johannesburg as an official sideline event of B20 South Africa 2025, Mene joined global leaders gathered to confront the key issues shaping Africa's future and influencing the global economy. Here's more from Channel Africa's economics reporter Innocent Simosa.
The summit convened influential leaders from business, government and finance, including regulators, policymakers and market participants, to explore Africa's evolving role in the global economy. Brenda Tsai, Bloomberg's chief marketing officer, spoke to us about the vision and purpose behind the summit.
We're here today because there's tremendous opportunity in Africa, and South Africa in particular holds a lot of that opportunity. On the back of the G20 and the B20, we are hosting our first ever Africa Business Summit. This is our inaugural summit, and it is an official side event of the G20.
After Secretary General Wamkele Mene says Africa must mobilize domestic capital to curb rising borrowing costs and boost investment across the continent.
Mobilizing our own domestic capital to invest in Africa, whether we are investing in infrastructure, in SMEs as an asset class.
Kasi Insight CEO Yannick Lefang says a functional digital payment system for SMEs could be a game changer.
Well, as you know, Africa is one of the biggest continents in the world, 54 countries, about 1.4 billion people today. It is estimated that the opening of that market with the ACF2, Africa Free Trade Continent, will turn it into a $3.3 trillion market over the next couple of years. And so part of that market involves payments and transactions. And so seamless payment on the continent will open up a significant opportunity for businesses to be able to trade, for African consumers to be able to buy and purchase products that are locally made on the continent. And it's so important because we live today in a geopolitical environment whereby the global trade is changing, the geopolitics is changing. I think Africa would have to rely a lot on itself.
I asked businessman Russell Luck what reforms or declarations he hopes to see at this year's G20. Here's what he had to say.
In terms of expectations of G20, it's tough to say. I think if you want change, it's got to start at home and it's got to start with you. I hope something productive comes out of it. It's disappointing that not certain key role players aren't at G20, but we've got to look forward and build positively. Africa is wonderful, loads of opportunity, loads of talented people, and we must just keep moving forward and the future will get better, but that's the way to challenge these things.
For Channel Africa News, I'm Innocent Samos in Johannesburg.
New day, new stories. Start your morning right with Rise and Shine on Channel Africa.
Eswatini has reportedly received $5.1 million under a confidential agreement to accept third country nationals deported by the Trump administration. Now, the deal revealed by Reuters news agency has sparked legal challenges at home, with human rights lawyers claiming that the arrangement was unconstitutional. Well, so far, at least 15 deportees have been sent to Eswatini from countries including Vietnam, Cuba, Laos, Yemen, and the Philippines, and most of them are in detention. Well, to help us understand the political, legal, and governance issues raised by this deal, we're now joined by Professor Lauren Landau, who's a migration governance expert with the Africa Center for Migration and Society at Wits University. Professor Landau, thanks very much indeed for joining us and welcome to the program.
Thank you. Good morning.
Prof, when you first heard about this deal, I'm just wondering what your initial reaction is. I guess the money rings quite loud, but I wonder if deals like this are unusual if we take the money out of the equation.
What we're seeing the US doing is something that Europe has also been doing for the last decade, really, which is trying to export what it sees as a migration problem, to try to make certain people and issues go away by sending them particularly to poorer countries. So Europe has made deals with Turkey, Europe has made deals with Rwanda in the past. The UK tried to do this and was blocked on human rights grounds. But under the Trump administration, we're seeing the US doing this. Before, they were connected to Mexico, trying to pay Mexico to do their work. And now what we're seeing is the US trying to dump its unwanted immigrants at various points across Africa. So Eswatini is just one of many who are taking payments from the United States to do this work.
All right. Is it illegal or just unethical?
I think it depends a little bit on the jurisdictional authorities, right? So what's legal in one country, in Rwanda, for example, they have made this legal, as far as I understand. It's unclear. I'm not an expert on Eswatini's legal system, but I think it's probably quite illegal under the US system because they're exporting people without due process. They're sending them to places where their human rights conditions or any conditions can't be assured. And I think it's certainly unethical. And we would expect to see countries like South Africa and others protesting what's going on, not because it means there's a direct risk to South Africa in terms of immigration, but there's a direct risk to the region when various countries are doing other countries' dirty work and violating human rights on their behalf.
I guess there's international law as well that sits above local laws. Where does this kind of activity sit in terms of recognized international human laws and practice?
I think it's a little bit ambiguous, and Europe and the United States have been playing on the margins. Clearly, as you say, there are ethical issues here which are very clear and being violated. If these people are not refugees, then it's not clear, then states have a right to export them, to send them elsewhere. No one has a right to send someone to a place where they may be at risk. But if Swaziland or Rwanda or Ghana or Uganda can say, we will keep these people safe, then it may be actually legal to do this at least under international law. But it's not necessarily ethical, and it's not clear under domestic laws.
What it sounds like to me is rendition. Isn't this what this is?
Well, it's very similar. I mean, in the sense that these people have been arrested, they're being sent somewhere without due process and without access to legal representation. It's unclear what will happen to them. As you said, that this has been a secret deal. These 15 people that were sent there, it's unclear how long they will be there. They're being held at a maximum security prison, which is not necessarily suitable for someone who has an immigration violation. And it's not clear what happens to them next. So these are, whether it's rendition in the way of completely making people disappear off the street, it's probably not that extreme, but it's getting close.
I suppose once you move from one territory to another, local laws kick in, as you were describing. So what kind of rights should a person be able to enjoy in a country like Eswatini or any normal country once they've arrived there?
Right. I mean, what we know from Eswatini, of course, as our neighbor, is that many citizens don't have the rights that they're entitled to under the country's constitution. It is an absolute monarchy, and there's been persecution of human rights activists, other civil society activists. So we would expect obviously a prisoner should have all the rights of a citizen if they're there. But in this case, it's not clear that citizens even have all those many rights. If a prisoner is brought in to a country, they should be brought in under due process. There should be transparency. They should be on the records, the public records. People should know who is being brought into their country and what their country is doing. My sense is that in Eswatini, none of those conditions are applying.
What are the risks to the receiving countries, do you think, for receiving sometimes genuine criminals from other countries?
Right. I think the risks in that sense are relatively small. They are being put straight into a prison. Again, will they be released? Will they be then sent on? We don't know. I don't think the risks from the particular immigrants are particularly high. I think the risk is more about a kind of moral corruption and being basically under the thumb of a country like the United States, which in this case is not a reliable partner. And I think there is a kind of moral risk to the region when Africa is being seen as a dumping ground for people from other regions. They're not even Africans being sent here. And where Africa, this is a kind of neo-imperialist project where the United States or Europe or other countries are getting Africa to do its will for what is actually $5 million in this case is what a very small payment.
Usually, if you are from Laos and you get deported from a country like the US, aren't you supposed to be deported to your country of origin? Is that not the norm or international law?
That is this absolutely the standard way, and that's how it should happen. So if either of us were out of our, caught somewhere doing something, we should be sent back home. The issue with that is that it requires the cooperation of both states. So in this case, in the example you gave, the United States and Laos, if Laos doesn't accept that this person is either a citizen or doesn't accept that they are welcome back for whatever reason, whether that's political or criminal, then the US is stuck with them. Typically, under law, then the US would need to house this person until another solution could be found, or imprison them until their time is up for whatever crime they've committed. This is a way around that. It's a way of sending citizens to a place without their own country's either knowledge or agreement, and where they can basically be made to disappear.
The money aspect, I guess, becomes really troubling because what it's doing is commoditizing people and problems, especially now with vulnerable countries such as developing nations across the continent who don't have money. Is this going to become a trend, do you think, especially as you've detailed that European countries have been trying to do this already?
Yeah, I mean, of course, African countries have been a dumping ground for detritus. We send recycled goods there. We send other things that we don't want from wealthy countries to African countries or other poor countries. And now, essentially, we're seeing a pattern in which human beings are being sent in a very similar pattern as the garbage of some other countries and being brought to Africa for a small amount of money. This is obviously an affront to those people being deported. It's an affront to the citizens of countries that are being asked to host someone else's unwanted people. And I think it does send a very powerful kind of message about global politics, about where Africa sits in the hierarchy. We know President Trump deeply dislikes and distrusts Africa and the region. It's why he's not here for the G20 summit. And this is another way of him sending a message to the people of Southern Africa about where they stand in the world.
Left unchecked, where's this going to end up? What's your biggest fear?
Well, I think that this is probably the start of what will be the new normal around the world, in which countries in the language of protecting themselves and protecting their citizenry will increasingly offshore these issues. This puts them out of sight of the domestic audience, so Americans or Europeans don't need to know what's going on. They don't know, they won't care. And this is a way, I think, of dealing with the problem, which is endemic to the world that we live in. Migration is a normal thing, it will continue, but the human consequences of this and the consequences for the rule of law and human rights more generally, I think, can be quite severe.
Professor Landau, always great talking to you. Thank you so much indeed for your thoughts on this troubling story. Thank you for your time.
It's a pleasure.
So Professor Landau speaking to us Lauren Landau. He's a migration governance expert from the African Center for Migration and Society at Wits University, talking to us about this selling of prisoners, Asanda, from one country to another. It's quite sad that this is the world we live in now.
Yeah, absolutely. It's crazy.
From Africa's broadcast capital to the furthest corners of the globe, this is Rise and Shine, every weekday mornings on Channel Africa.
We now enter the third and final hour of Africa Rise and Shine. You tuned into Channel Africa. www.channelafrica.co.za is where you can connect with us via YouTube as well. We're live streaming at Channel Africa 1 is our handle. My name is Asanda Beda. Good morning. And we talk all things G20 as we continue with our countdown to this gathering. And we'll be looking at a few stories there. One of them, our President Cyril Ramaphosa having addressed the G20 chief executives working dinner last night.
A very good morning. I'm Peter Ndoro, for sure. And also just a reminder that Channel Africa is going to be bringing you dedicated programming this weekend from Johannesburg in South Africa for this important gathering, the G20 Leaders Summit, which kicks off in earnest on Saturday. So please tune in from 8 a.m. on Central African time on Saturday for dedicated broadcast of the G20 Leaders Summit in Johannesburg.
Let's get our news now. Here's Onele Nsinsi, and then following her is Musibudi Makura with sports headlines.
SABC News. The African Perspective.
Well, thank you, Asanda. Fresh fighting has broken out in the east of the Democratic Republic of Congo. This is just days after representatives of the government and the M23 rebels signed a framework for peace in the Qatari capital of Doha. Authorities say the rebels have seized a strategic village in South Kivu province that has routes connecting to different parts of the eastern Congo. Chris Okambringa in Kinshasa reports.
The Congolese army says the M23 rebels carried out a surprise attack on their positions in the territory of Shabunda over the weekend. After hours of fighting, the rebels took control of the village of Maimingi in the country's east. Violent clashes are still going on between the warring parties in the mineral-rich region of South Kivu province. The clashes come 2 days after representatives of the DRC government and the rebels signed a framework for peace in Qatar. The framework is supposed to establish a ceasefire, prisoner exchanges, and the restoration of state authority in the rebel-held areas, among 5 other key points.
Human Rights Watch has published a report that's indicating that at least 31 people have been killed in attacks on 2 villages in Mali's central Segou region by the country's military and allied militias. The report reveals that the first attack occurred last month in the village of Kamona, where the army and militia forces killed at least 21 men and burnt homes. Witnesses have described the army and militia forces executing villagers after accusing them of collaborating with an extremist group. South Africa's Chief of Staff in the Police Ministry, Cedric Nkabinde, is back again before the ad hoc committee today. The committee is probing allegations made by the KwaZulu-Natal Province Police Commissioner Nhlanhla Mkhwanazi of criminal infiltration, corruption and political interference in the justice system. Nkabinde was sent packing last week after he admitted that he thumb-sucked some of his testimony relating to Police Minister Senzo Mchunu and the Northwest businessman Brown Mahotsi. Committee Chairperson Molapi Lekhanyane explains.
Mr. Cedric Nkabinde will come back. The proceedings are at Good Hope Chambers. And then the head of procurement at the SAPS, Lieutenant General Fani, will be coming on Thursday. So there was also other proposal that General Nsikidi must come on Friday.
The Southern African Development Community has launched its 5-year communication, awareness and visibility strategy in Botswana's capital city, Gaborone. The strategy was approved by SADC Council of Ministers in August this year during a meeting held in Antananarivo, Madagascar, ahead of the 44th Ordinary Summit of Heads of States and Government. SADC's Deputy Executive Secretary for Regional Integration, Angele Makombo Ntumba, says the strategy is meant to foster the telling of stories to promote regional integration.
The communication, awareness and visibility strategy 2025-2030 that is designed to enhance public understanding of SADC's mandate, priorities and impact, and leverage multiple platforms to reach diverse audiences across member states. This strategy embraces our region's rich diversity, linguistic, cultural and social, and ensures inclusivity for women, youth, persons with disabilities.
Lastly, the Israeli military says it struck Hamas militants who it said were carrying out training in a Palestinian refugee camp in Lebanon. The health ministry in Lebanon said at least 13 people were killed and several others wounded. The BBC's Hugo Pachega.
Footage posted online showed ambulances rushing through the narrow streets of the crowded refugee camp as a huge plume of smoke billowed from the location hit. Initial reports say the attack struck an area outside a mosque that is usually busy at night. Palestinian factions are known to be present in the camp. The Israeli military said the alleged compound that was attacked was used by Hamas members for training and exercises in order to plan and carry out attacks against Israel. It has provided no evidence to support the claims.
For any news stories you'd like to share with us, please send us an email to newsroom@channelafrica.co.za or call us at +27 11 714 4459. Channel Africa News, I'm Oneli Tsinzi.
SABC News. The African Perspective.
And coming up in your sports news this hour, the stage is set for the 2025 CAF Awards, while Ireland ready for the Springboks Challenge as they wrap up their end-of-year tour. Details of these and other stories coming up at the bottom of the hour.
Wake up, Africa. Peter Ndoro and Asanda Beda are here to help you rise and shine. Weekdays, 6 till 9 a.m. Central African Time. Only on Channel Africa.
President Cyril Ramaphosa says business community has a critical role to play in driving inclusive economic growth on the continent and across the globe. The president stressed that the corporate South Africa is well positioned to enable and advance intra-Africa trade and investment in a meaningful way. Ramaphosa was addressing the G20 chief executives' working dinner last night. SABC economics reporter Naledi Ngobo filed this report.
President Cyril Ramaphosa has lauded the success of the country's public-private partnership, which he says is evidenced by the implementation of growth-enhancing structural reforms. He urged the business community to continue to innovate and strengthen its trading capacity despite the challenging environment.
The implementation of the African Continental Free Trade Area will profoundly transform market access for South African goods, services and investments. It will help to drive regional integration and value chains across borders. It will expand opportunities for businesses to access a wider African market of about 1.4 billion people at the moment and rising even more when we reach 2.5 billion people, and currently with a combined GDP of $3.4 trillion.
Chairperson of the IDC, Gloria Serube, says the state-owned development funder remains committed to accelerating industrialization across the African continent. She emphasized that driving structural transformation from primary production to value-added manufacturing is an important element of the IDC's continental strategy.
We aim to build competitive regional value chains in sectors such as energy, agro-processing, automotive and green technologies, creating jobs, driving innovation, and ensuring Africa's voice is strong in global markets. We believe that Africa's prosperity will be driven by collaboration between governments, business leaders, and development institutions.
Investec CEO Kumesh Mujia points out that with the continent expected to boast a population of 2.5 billion by 2050, it presents a vibrant and viable market to trade a myriad of goods and services.
We are able to play to a number of key strengths on the continent: abundant renewable energy sources, rich in minerals, rich in diversity, and rich in human capital. It's an exciting time to be South African, and we all play a critical role into the next chapter.
I'm Naledi Ngcobo in Johannesburg.
As South Africa prepares to host the G20 Leader Summit this weekend, the global community has been called upon to confront the persistent and emerging barriers to gender equality with renewed urgency and innovation. The call was made at a high-level gathering celebrating women leadership, innovation and inclusive growth in Johannesburg last night. Leaders from some of the world's biggest advanced and emerging economies, the G20 group of nations, are expected to descend to Johannesburg for their annual summit. Nhlanhla Mahlangu has more.
A Pan-African woman-led advisory and execution firm, Amila Africa, last night hosted the Women in Trade and Investment Networking event in Johannesburg, South Africa, spotlighting African women shaping global trade, investment, innovation and cultural excellence. Taking place ahead of the G20 summit, the event brought together women leaders who are shaping the future of global trade and investment, including policymakers, investors, entrepreneurs and creatives. Litabo Sitole, Managing Director at Amila Africa, says the event highlighted women's leadership as central to global economic transformation. She says the upcoming G20 summit also offers a rare chance for South Africa to put women's interests and those of the African continent and the global south at large at the center of the international agenda while promoting the country as a major investment destination.
You know, I think it's a monumental occasion for Africa to host its first G20 ever. And I think what you have seen is a lot of women being either the chairs or the co-chairs of working groups and task forces and really leading them with great courage, with grit, with excellence. And I think if there was ever a doubt that women can lead global platforms, that has been debunked. And the opportunities I see are for women to platform themselves, to access new markets, to collaborate with women from across the world. I mean, we are hosting the world, quite literally. We're hosting the 20 most powerful economies in the world. And so as a South African woman, I don't think you'll ever get another opportunity to host the world at home and host the world and see what the world has for you and take it.
Dr. Cindy Swamzamo, Global President at Circle of Global Business Women, was the keynote speaker. She says the upcoming G20 summit offers immense opportunities for women.
The opportunities for the upcoming G20 initiatives, I can say they're galore. Remember, we are talking to the G20 countries, which is member states of about 20 member states, including Africa. Because if you look at Africa, and the reason why I'm actually passionate about this, if you look at Africa, we've got 70% of the population. It's young people in the continent, and they're no longer the future. They are the leadership, and they must start leading right now. So they're the real women of tomorrow.
The G20 Leaders Summit, scheduled for Saturday the 22nd and Sunday the 23rd of November, will mark the culmination of South Africa's G20 presidency. It will be hosted for the first time on African soil under this year's theme of solidarity, equality and sustainability. Thousands of international delegates, media representatives and visitors are expected to gather at the Nasrec Expo Center in Johannesburg for the two-day summit. Reporting for Channel Africa, I am Nhlanhla Mahlangu in Johannesburg.
The African Panel of Experts chairperson Trevor Manuel has made a call on the global rating agencies to refrain from unfairly discriminating against African economies. Manuel was speaking at the handover ceremony of the G20 Africa Expert Panel report in Johannesburg, South Africa, on Tuesday. Manuel says the continent presents a lot of opportunities amid its challenges, and these agencies are not being fair to the continent. Nothando Magudulela reports.
The African Panel of Experts chairperson Trevor Manuel says the G20 Africa Expert Panel report is a work in progress that goes beyond just a report. He says the panel
G20 in Africa
on how they will improve prosperity on the African continent, among other things detailed in the report. Manuel says the panel has identified a multitude of challenges on the continent, one being the issue of debt and how many African countries are under debt pressure. In the same breath, Manuel has made a call on global rating agencies to be fair on how they rate countries on the African continent.
There are some issues that have excited Minister Godongwana greatly, and amongst these is the operations of the ratings agencies. What we are calling for is for ratings agencies to declare the metrics that they use, so that when you're comparing one country with the other, you can understand exactly what the basis is. And if it can't be supported by empirical evidence, then I think we have to call out the ratings agencies for unfairly discriminating against African economies.
President Cyril Ramaphosa welcomed the report, saying that some ideas will be taken forward beyond the G20.
And the idea that you put on the agenda that there should be a borrowers club, there is a Paris club, a club of lenders, and there's no reason why we should not have a borrowers club, where countries that borrow money get together and share best practice and share experiences. So that is, in my view, a really good proposal which we would like to see taken forward.
The long-anticipated leaders' meeting is fast approaching after holding numerous meetings among government, business, labor and civil society, among others. This year, South Africa will host the finale Heads of State meeting on the 22nd and 23rd of November 2025. Nothando Makutulela, SABC News, Johannesburg.
New day, new stories. Start your morning right with Rise and Shine on Channel Africa.
The South African Police Service says that a hard lockdown will be implemented around the Nasrec Expo Centre south of Johannesburg in South Africa from Friday to Monday for the G20 Leaders Summit. This was announced during a media briefing by the National Joint Operation and Intelligence Structures, NAT joints, on the security cluster state of readiness to secure the summit. Sachin Naidu has more.
With the G20 Leaders Summit just a few days away, law enforcement agencies are hard at work to ensure that everything goes as planned. The NAT Joint says they have no doubt that just like many other major international events that they have policed over the years, this one too will take place in a safe, secure and peaceful environment. Deputy National Commissioner for Policing Tebelo Mosekedi says only those with valid accreditation will be allowed in the vicinity of the summit.
We confirm that from Friday the 21st of November up until Monday the 24th of November 2025, we will be implementing a hard lockdown in the vicinity of the FNB Stadium, which is housing the accreditation center as well as the Nasrec Expo Conference Center that will host dignitaries and delegates. The implementation of the hard lockdown simply means that if you are not in possession of a valid accreditation to be in and around the Nasrec Expo Center, you will not be allowed near this vicinity.
Mosekedi says lawlessness will not be tolerated and that the South African National Defence Force will be on standby to respond to any eventuality or disturbances during the summit.
We are implementing combat approach in response to any violation of the law through the deployment of our uniformed officers, including our specialized units. Which, should the need arises, will also have the South African National Defence Force on standby to exercise their secondary role of supporting the South African Police Service in their duty.
But the security environment is expected to be further tested by multiple protest actions planned for Friday. Civil society group Women for Change will lead an anti-GBV demonstration, while several other groupings are planning protest actions around Johannesburg. Mosikidi says those that fail to comply and attempt to cause disruptions during the summit will face the full might of the law.
There are designated speakers' corners around the vicinity of Nasrec that have been identified for this purpose. We will therefore not allow any disruptions, lawlessness, and no damaging and defacing of G20 infrastructure, including posters. Ladies and gentlemen, all law enforcement agencies deployed to secure the event will enforce the law at all times and all areas of deployment, including routes used by delegates, the accommodation, and at this venue.
Motorists travelling around the vicinity of the Nasrec Expo Centre are also advised to expect major traffic delays this weekend due to road closures as a result of the summit.
These specific routes that are already affected include parts of the N1, the N3, the N12, R21, R24, and the M1. Important to note, when convoys are moving, roads will be closed off completely, and the movement from road users, pedestrians, cyclists, motorists will be limited. Roads will be opened as soon as the convoys move past the affected routes.
South Africa's Deputy President Paul Mashatile says the country is unfazed by the US's non-participation in the G20 Leaders Summit and its subsequent threats to mobilize for the rejection of the summit declaration. Mashatile was speaking on the sidelines of the G20 Social Summit in the east of Johannesburg. He says they take solace in the countries that want to see the first ever successful G20 summit on the African continent. Ndebo Mukobo reports.
South Africa is for the first time hosting the first ever G20 summit in Africa on Friday, but it seems it will not go smoothly without naysayers. The incoming G20 president, the United States under Donald Trump, has shunned the event and also mobilizing some G20 countries to reject the outcomes of the gathering, only known as the Johannesburg Declaration, expected on Saturday. But speaking at the start of the G20 Social Summit on Tuesday, the country's second in command, Paul Mashatile, says they are not worried about the U.S. posture, insisting that countries of the world are behind Pretoria.
The countries that are going to be here will be part of the declaration that we are going to take. So it's not just a South African declaration or South African issues. These are issues of the world. So we are going to make sure that with other countries, we fight for what we believe in. We'll continue to do so that these gains are not reversed by anybody. So we are standing together with other countries to ensure that the decisions that we are going to take are going forward. We are going to implement them.
His sentiments were echoed by former Deputy President and now the co-convener of the G20 Social Summit, Dr. Phumzile Mlambo-Ngcuka, who said they have to implement the outcomes of the summit whether the US back them or not.
We cannot be held back by one country. We have the whole world that is here, that is behind us, and that should give us the necessary oomph to take the issues forward. And we have seen the mood of the delegates. They are very clear and they are pointing at different ways in which we can sustain this agenda if the few pull out.
Mlambo-Ngcuka said the outcomes of this gathering must also help to achieve the sustainable development goals before their deadline in 5 years, insisting that the African continent must use its resources to change the lives of its people.
The outcomes of this summit must support the last 5 remaining years of the implementation of the Sustainable Development Goals. We must also support the vision that is enshrined in Agenda 2063. Africa is not poor. We should be able to industrialize because we have 30% of the world's critical minerals. If Africa is not doing well, it is because we are not providing leadership. So in these 3 days, we should start the new order with each one of us taking the responsibility to lead.
Mashatile, on the other hand, used the opportunity to commend young people for their worthy contribution to the 3-day discussions.
It is commendable that through the Y20 communique, African youth have effectively delivered directly youth-driven recommendation to G20 leaders, influencing policy and decision-making. Their active participation in the Y20 and social summit positions them as vital contributors to the creation of sustainable and inclusive global future.
President Cyril Ramaphosa will close the G20 Social Summit on Thursday, where he will receive the summit declaration and table it at the Leaders' Summit starting on Friday. His Brazilian counterpart Lula da Silva is also expected to feature on the final day. I am Tebo Mokobo, Boxback in Ekuruleni.
Mix Vibration sur Channel Africa.
Qu'est-ce qui vous a amené à dire ça? Est-ce que vous avez observé un certain nombre d'événements dans la vie? Est-ce que c'était par rapport à une expérience? Est-ce que vous avez rencontré des choses qui vous ont dit il faut de la patience, comme ça les choses vont venir au bon moment et le bon Dieu pourra peut-être me visiter?
Oui, c'était justement un conseil que le Seigneur m'a fait inspirer pour donner à son peuple, parce qu'il y a la plupart des gens, pendant que Dieu bénit les autres, ils pensent que Dieu les a oubliés, et pendant que Dieu ouvre pour les autres, ils pensent que peut-être Dieu n'a pas pu écouter leurs prières. Alors, ce n'est pas le cas. Alors, Dieu bénit tout un chacun de nous avec son temps. Donc, le temps de Dieu est toujours le meilleur dans la vie de tout un chacun de nous.
Mix Vibration, tous les dimanches de 18h à 19h, temps universel.
Ahoy, matey!
Captain here to help, right, boys?
Set sail with us on a digital voyage like no other. Channel Africa has a treasure trove of awesomeness. That is our website and social media pages.
Tell me, why are you here?
We want you to be part of our adventure.
The winds are changing, Captain. And this time...
Imagine a world where curiosity knows no bounds, where entertainment meets enlightenment, and where every click leads to the African perspective. Visit us on our website, www.channelafrica.co.za, or follow us on Instagram or on X at Channel Africa One. Go on, like us on Facebook at Channel Africa One. So, spread the word. Tell a friend that Channel Africa's online variety is what they need on the web. Channel Africa, the African perspective. Wake up, Africa. Peter Ndoro and Asanda Beda are here to help you rise and shine. Weekdays, 6 till 9 a.m. Central African Time. Only on Channel Africa.
South Africa's International Relations Minister Ronald Lamola has downplayed the United States' absence from this weekend's G20 Leaders Summit in Johannesburg, saying that the country simply views it as a non-attendance. Lamola says that the US has made it clear that it will not participate, but stressed that the summit will proceed with the nations that are present. He added that the Sherpas are continuing negotiations on the leaders' declaration, and South Africa is working to secure consensus among attending countries as preparations for the landmark gathering reach their final stages. Channel Africa reporter Michael Mbewe picks up the story.
It is all systems go for the G20 Leaders Summit, with or without the United States. That was the clear message from South Africa's Minister of International Relations and Cooperation, Ronald Lamola, as the country enters its final preparations to host the landmark gathering in Johannesburg. Lamola made it plain that while the US has opted not to attend, the show will go on, or the work of the G20 will continue with the nations present. He emphasized that negotiations on the Leaders' Declaration are progressing and that South Africa remains focused on steering the summit toward meaningful outcomes. In his words, the absence of one country does not halt global cooperation, and South Africa is ready to welcome the world. Addressing the media, South Africa's Minister of International Relations and Cooperation, Ronald Lamola said the U.S. has decided to stay away.
How do we view the U.S. non-attendance? They have said it themselves, that they are not coming. That's what they've said. They are not attending. You can call it whatever. Someone can call it a boycott. Someone will call it non-attendance. But the reality is that they are not attending. They are not here. We view it as non-attendance. They are absent. So in their absence, the countries that are present must take a decision. And that is what is currently unfolding. The Sherpas are negotiating the leaders' declaration. We are moving towards making a decision in terms of the leaders' declaration. Negotiations are happening. And in the later stage, in the course of the week later, you will hear what is the outcome. But we are forging ahead to persuade the countries that are present that we must adopt a leaders' declaration.
Besides the U.S. and Argentina, China, Canada, and Mexico will be represented by senior government officials rather than their heads of state. Lamola said this should not be interpreted as Africa being sidelined or disrespected.
We don't see this as a snub or undermining of Africa. In all multilateral platforms events, it does happen for whatever reasons that heads of states are not able to attend, and they will delegate whoever they decide to delegate, either their foreign minister or whoever that the head of state decides to delegate for whatever reasons and whatever architecture of that country. It's nothing abnormal. Even ourselves sometimes, I represent President Ramaphosa in many platforms. And the recent one, high-level event, I represented the president, was at the Financing for Development in Sevilla in Spain. You'll remember when the president had challenges at that time in the GNU and so forth. I represented him in Spain, and I've represented him in many platforms.
South Africa's Finance Minister Enoch Godongwana echoed Lamola's remarks, noting that such geopolitical tensions have been a recurring feature of past G20 summits.
You know, it's not the first time that we have got geopolitical problems in the G20. The first acute problem, which was bigger than the one we're facing now, was in Indonesia. It was the first year of Ukraine war, and the tensions were more acute at the time, particularly between the G7 and the developing world. So it was not only one country, it was the G7 and the developing world. I would imagine first opening sentence of all the countries of the G20, or G7, we must condemn Russia for attacking Ukraine, and we couldn't find each other on a declaration. We've managed, the G20 did not collapse. We carried through that geopolitical problem into India. The G20 did not collapse.
Gauteng Premier Panyaza Lesufi detailed the steps the province has taken to ensure it is fully prepared to host the multilateral gathering, including infrastructure improvements and financial readiness.
From our side as a province, what we've done for the preparations, especially infrastructure, water, electricity, and the beautification of the entire province, we requested departments to use their current budgets. So there was no new money that was allocated specifically for the G20. What we've done in the last 4 months, we've been meeting every Tuesday. Myself as the Premier with the MECs, the Executive Mayors and national leadership, that's the ministers that are responsible for this task. And we went item by item that has been budgeted for and allocated to municipalities and provincial government. And we've worked extremely hard to ensure that we fix the street lights, the traffic lights, fill the potholes, and attend to issues that need to be attended.
Michael Mbewe, Channel Africa News, Johannesburg.
And now it's time for our news headlines. Let's say good morning to Onele Nzinzi, 8:31 Central African Time it is.
SABC News. Headlines. The African Perspective.
Thank you, Asanda. Fresh fighting has broken out in the east of the Democratic Republic of Congo. This is just days after representatives of the government and the M23 rebels signed a framework for peace in the Qatari capital of Doha. South Africa's President Ramaphosa is adamant that the G20 Leaders Summit is going to be a success. And President Donald Trump has defended the Saudi crown prince over the killing of the journalist Jamal Khashoggi by Saudi agents at the kingdom's Istanbul consulate 7 years ago. Channel Africa News, I'm Onele Nzinzi.
SABC News. Headlines. The African Perspective.
Time now for us to find out what's happening in the world of sport on Channel Africa with Musibudi Makura.
Sports on Channel Africa. The African Perspective.
Thank you so much, Peter. Very good morning from the sports desk. So former Morocco's women's international Zanib Richeche has applauded the Royal Moroccan Football Federation for the work done in improving women's football in the country in recent years. Now, the Atlas Lionesses made a stunning debut at the 2023 FIFA World Cup in Australia as well as New Zealand as they progress to the knockout stages and have reached back-to-back Women's Africa Cup of Nations finals in 2022 and in 2024. Now, the former player says the Royal Moroccan Football Federation's investment in girls as well as women's football facilities has positively contributed to the team's success.
The focus that King Mohammed VI has in the pillar around education, sport, international diplomacy, infrastructure has, led the country to, the stages we are today. Top-notch facilities and being able to really have the same access as, the men's team, but even one of the top men's team across the globe has led to the result that we're seeing today. So I'm immensely proud to acknowledge and see where we have reached.
Now, the former midfielder who played for the likes of Paris Saint-Germain, Atletico Madrid, as well as clubs in Canada, USA, as well as Switzerland, hung her boots back in 2023 after a stint in the United Arab Emirates. She also became the first Arab woman to obtain a FIFA football agent license in 2024, and says her background in finance has always inspired her to advise her teammates while she was still playing, which pushed her to become an agent.
Well, obviously, when I was, I would say, getting my license, these are not things that I was thinking about or even knowing that I would be the first. I think it just came a bit naturally with my experience as a former football player, and I was also having a double hat in the corporate world. So it came naturally that I wanted to stay in the football world, but maybe more with a focus on the business side of football.
On to rugby news now. Island centre Robbie Henshaw believes their final Autumn Nations Series fixture against the world champions South Africa will be a proper test in terms of assessing just where the squad is. At the moment, Ireland suffered a dispiriting loss to New Zealand before a below-par performance over Japan, but then bounced back in ruthless fashion just last weekend with a record 46-19 victory over the Wallabies of Australia, with Henshaw also scoring one of the 6 tries. So having won the rugby championship, South Africa are from 3 in the November matches in the Northern Hemisphere. The Springboks will now look to claim a tour clean sweep in Dublin after victories over Japan at Wembley Stadium, France at Stade de France, and Italy in Turin last weekend. Now, Ireland famously stunned South Africa in the group stages at the 2023 Rugby World Cup, and the sides drew a summer series in 2024. On to athletics news now. South African road running star Glenrose Qaba is set to make a major decision as she prepares for what promises to be a jam-packed 2026 season. Her calendar is already overflowing with commitments such as the World Half Marathon, as well as the World Cross Country Championships, as well as the Commonwealth Games, and above all, her usual local calendar. On top of that, she hopes to also run a major marathon, with Qaba now telling SABC Sport that she will need to make small decisions to manage such a demanding schedule.
Yes, I can love to be a more successful and more athlete that they can look to. But I have bigger goals also. But I can love to run Spar Ladies again. I'm looking forward to run it again. But I don't think I will do all of them. I will choose which ones that I need to focus on them. I think if I can do very well in first one is the one that will give me the idea that I need to complete all of them.
And finally, in tennis news, Great Britain's Joe Salisbury, six-time Grand Slam doubles champion, as well as a former world number one, is to take a break from tennis because of anxiety, which has affected him on tour. The 33-year-old is not planning to return before April after a year in which his discomfort has intensified, leaving him with many physical symptoms and also feeling of dread, he says. Now, the player has experienced those feelings at other times, in what has been a hugely successful career. Back in 2022, he became just the second British man in history to top the doubles world rankings, and his 6 Grand Slam titles include a hat-trick at the US Open. Now, he has had therapy, but it was when sitting out a run of tournaments in Asia that he decided it was time for him to take a longer break to look after his mental health. And that's a wrap from the Sports Desk at the Sawa. For any sports stories you'd like to share with us, our email address is newsroom@channelafrica.co.za. Give us a call as well on +27 11714 4459. I'm back with more sports news with the On the Move team in the next hour. For Channel Africa Sport, I am Musibu Di Makura.
Sports on Channel Africa. The African Perspective.
Mix Vibration sur Channel Africa.
Qu'est-ce qui vous a amené à dire ça? Est-ce que vous avez observé un certain nombre d'événements dans la vie? Est-ce que c'était par rapport à une expérience? Est-ce que vous avez rencontré des choses qui vous ont dit il faut de la patience, comme ça les choses vont venir au bon moment et les bons dieux pourra peut-être me visiter?
Oui, c'était justement un conseil que le Seigneur m'a fait inspirer pour donner à son peuple, parce qu'il y a la plupart des gens, pendant que Dieu bénit les autres, ils pensent que Dieu les a oubliés, et pendant que Dieu ouvre pour les autres, ils pensent que peut-être Dieu n'a pas pu écouter leurs prières. Alors, ce n'est pas le cas. Alors, Dieu bénit tout un chacun de nous avec son temps. Donc, le temps de Dieu est toujours le meilleur dans la vie de tout un chacun de nous.
Mix Vibration, tous les dimanches de 18h à 19h, temps universel.
Let's now check in with what's happening in the world of business with Buntle Hedbush.
Business News on Channel Africa. The African Perspective.
Thanks, Asanda, and a very good morning to our listeners. In our top story, Zambia will host a Chinese premier for the first time in 28 years as a sub-Saharan country emerges from a financial crisis. Beijing is eager to access the country's commodities and develop a bigger market for its exporters. Premier Li Qiang arrives in Lusaka today as part of a push to deepen China's presence in the copper-rich country as Europe and the US vie to become the alternative benefactors now that Zambia's $13.4 billion debt is on a more sustainable repayment plan. China is Zambia's largest official creditor with $5.7 billion owed. President Cyril Ramaphosa has assured corporate South Africa that it has the support of government in its efforts to establish trade and investment opportunities throughout the continent. He urged the business community to continue to innovate and strengthen its trading capacity despite the challenging environment. Ramaphosa was addressing the G20 Chief Executives Working Dinner hosted by Investec and sponsored by the Industrial Development Corporation in Sandton, north of Johannesburg.
The implementation of the African Continental Free Trade Area will profoundly transform market access for South African goods, services and investments. It will help to drive regional integration and value chains across borders. It will expand opportunities for businesses to access a wider African market of about 1.4 billion people at the moment and rising even more when we reach 2.5 billion people. And currently with a combined GDP of $3.4 trillion.
Meanwhile, the chairperson of the Industrial Development Corporation, Gloria Sirobe, has emphasized that the state-owned development funder remains committed to accelerating industrialization across the African continent. She emphasized that driving structural transformation from primary production to value-added manufacturing is an important element of the IDC's continental strategy. Sirobe was also addressing the G20's Chief Executives Working Dinner hosted by Investec in Sandton.
We aim to build competitive regional value chains in sectors such as energy, agro-processing, automotive and green technologies, creating jobs, driving innovation, and ensuring Africa's voice is strong in global markets. We believe that Africa's prosperity will be driven by collaboration between governments, business leaders, and development institutions.
Gabon's government and a coalition of donors have signed an agreement aimed at protecting 34,000 square kilometers of the country's Congo Basin rainforests. Dubbed Gabon Infini, the plan will combine $94 million of donor money from the likes of the Global Environment Facility and the Bezos Earth Fund, with $86 million of government funding over a 10-year period. It aims to finance new national parks, tackle elephant poaching, and boost ecotourism using what is known as Project Fund for Permanence model. This is an approach that binds the disbursement of funding to key government policy changes. This debt for nature swap model is gaining popularity, with Brazil announcing a similar agreement on Monday, covering nearly 243,000 square kilometers of the Amazon rainforest, while Kenya and Namibia are also in the process of finalizing deals. A federal judge in the United States has ruled that the tech giant Meta does not hold a monopoly in social media, and its acquisition of the photo-sharing app Instagram and the messaging app WhatsApp did not violate antitrust laws. The ruling comes after a 5-year legal battle with the U.S. Federal Trade Commission. The BBC's Lily Jamali has more details.
The FTC argued Meta overpaid for Instagram in 2012 and WhatsApp 2 years later in a bid to neutralize its rivals. But on Tuesday, Judge James Boasberg in Washington sided with Meta, which had argued the company faces fierce competition from rivals like YouTube and TikTok. The case allows Meta to avoid a potential breakup and, experts say, helps slow some of the momentum that American antitrust regulators have gained in recent years.
And now for a look at the indicators, one US dollar in Nigeria is trading at 1,445 naira this morning. In Botswana, it's 13 pula 87 Kenya. The dollar is trading at 128 shillings 71, and in Zambia, it's 22 kwacha 70. Moving to the BRICS countries, $1 in Brazil is trading at 5 real 32. Russia, 81 rubles 11. In India, it's 88 rupees 57. China, 7 yuan 10, and South Africa, $1 is trading at 17 rand 19 cents this morning. $1 is trading at 76 pence to the British pound, 86 to the euro. Looking at commodities, gold is trading at $4,075 per ounce, platinum at $1,542 per ounce, while the price of Brent crude oil is at $64.66 a barrel this morning. And those are your business news. I'll be back with another update in the next hour. For any business news stories you'd like to share with us, please do send us an email to newsroom@channelafrica.co.za or give us a call on +27 11 714 4459 for Channel Africa Business. I am Bontle Hetbush.
Business News on Channel Africa. The African Perspective. Wake up, Africa. Beda Ndoro and Asanda Beda are here to help you rise and shine. Weekdays, 6 till 9 a.m. Central African Time. Only on Channel Africa.
Right, let's take a look at this story now. It's International Fraud Awareness Week, and experts say online scams are rising worldwide as criminals use artificial intelligence and stolen personal data to deceive consumers. Cyber breaches, identity fraud, and sophisticated impersonation scams are expanding across the globe in the digital economy. Channel Africa's Lebohang Mabange reports.
Across the world, people are facing a surge in digital fraud, fueled by easier access to personal information and new AI-powered tools that make scams harder to detect. Dr. Jerry Cherry, head of business integrity at Santam, says cyber criminals are becoming increasingly advanced.
Fraudulent scams are on the increase. The reason for the increase is because of the readily available personal information which is available on the dark web due to the numerous cyber breaches we see happening every day. Further, fraudsters are starting to use AI tools to perpetrate fraudulent scams. They use AI tools to draft legitimate-looking messages to entice victims to share personal information.
He says one of the fastest growing threats globally is impersonation fraud, where criminals use stolen identities to open accounts or create false credit records.
An example of a fraudulent scam is an impersonation. An impersonation is used to create credit records or open accounts on unsuspecting victims. As we go into the festive season, I anticipate these fraudulent scams will increase. Victims normally become less vigilant as we go into the festive season, and that is when fraudsters are most rife in terms of perpetrating the frauds.
Chetty warns that scammers use emotional pressure to force victims into revealing sensitive details.
There are various different types of frauds, for example, holiday scams, pet scams, and so forth. I urge consumers to be extra vigilant in terms of sharing information over the phone, and you will note a recent trend where the fraudster who's making the call exercises pressure on the unsuspecting victim in terms of telling them that they are going to lose vast amount of money if they do not share the information. I urge victims that when you receive such calls to cut the call immediately and rather contact the bank directly. Do not share any personal information telephonically.
He adds that fraudsters often create crisis scenarios to manipulate people into acting quickly.
Fraudsters also use crisis scenarios by informing unsuspecting victims that the fraudster is actively stealing money of their accounts and urge and force the victims to share this information. We should never share information over the phone.
With scams becoming increasingly global and sophisticated, experts say staying vigilant, especially around the holidays, is critical. With Black Friday also around the corner, consumers are advised to avoid pressure tactics, verify all unexpected calls, and never share personal information with strangers. Reporting for Channel Africa, I am Lebogang Mabange in Johannesburg, South Africa.
South Africa's President Cyril Ramaphosa has hailed the African Continental Free Trade Area as a game changer for the country's economic future, saying it will open unprecedented market access for South African goods, services and investment across a rapidly growing continent. Speaking at a G20 outreach program working dinner with top CEOs in Johannesburg, the president said the agreement will boost regional integration, strengthen cross-border value chains, and unlock opportunities in a continental market already numbering 1.4 billion people, a figure expected to reach 2.5 billion. Channel Africa's reporter Michael Mbewe was there and filed this report.
South Africa's upcoming hosting of the G20 Leaders Summit has set the stage for heightened dialogue between government and the business community, with President Cyril Ramaphosa meeting leading CEOs in Johannesburg on Tuesday evening, just days before the global gathering. The engagement, held at Investec's headquarters in Sandton, formed part of the country's G20 outreach program and aimed to deepen collaboration with the private sector as South Africa prepares to welcome world leaders this coming weekend. In his address, Ramaphosa underscored the importance of sustained investment in Africa, stressing that the continent's expanding markets and growing population presents unmatched opportunities for business growth. The meeting served as a platform to reaffirm South Africa's commitment to driving economic development, strengthening regional integration, and positioning Africa as a central player in global trade and investment.
The implementation of the African Continental Free Trade Area will profoundly transform market access for South African goods, services, and investments. It will help to drive regional integration and value chains across borders. It will expand opportunities for businesses to access a wider African market of about 1.4 billion people at the moment, and rising even more when we reach 2.5 billion people. And currently with a combined GDP of $3.4 trillion, grounded in our shared belief that South Africa's growth and prosperity is in the end intrinsically intertwined with that of the African continent.
Ramaphosa urged South African businesses to deepen their investment on the continent, reminding CEOs that despite the isolation of the apartheid era, South Africa is inherently African.
During apartheid days or years, we never saw South Africa as connected to the African continent. But we are inherently African. And therefore, through business acumen, business involvement, we must see ourselves as being fully African. And I'm rather proud that many of our companies have gone into various African markets. And we should do this as we continue to amplify our common heritage and shared future. We must undertake our activities, investment activities and otherwise, with greater purpose.
Furthermore, Ramaphosa appealed to South African companies to help drive a new economic trajectory for both the country and the continent, urging business to work with government in seizing opportunities beyond the nation's borders and contributing to a stronger, more prosperous Africa.
We are therefore calling on South African companies to be part of setting our country and our continent on a new economic trajectory. This is a task that we need to undertake together as government and as business, to look at opportunities beyond our borders and to be part of building a better Africa.
South Africa's International Relations Minister Roland Lamola reinforced Ramaphosa's message, calling for deeper regional trade in SADC and pushing for 50% integration to boost intra-African commerce. He noted that most goods traded within Africa are already processed and said full implementation of the African Continental Free Trade Area could unlock a 3.4 trillion market provided the continent invests in infrastructure and seamless cross-border connectivity.
In the SADC region, our trade is at 21%. We must strive for at least 50% regional integration on trade in the SADC region, which will be a catalyst to increase our trade in the whole continent to more than 16%. But interestingly, when African countries trade with each other, over 60% of the goods traded are processed or semi-processed. The full implementation of the African Continental Free Trade Area could create a market worth 3.4 trillion. Unlocking this potential will require sustained investment in infrastructure and seamless cross-border connectivity.
Speaking on behalf of Business Industrial Development Corporations, IDC South Africa Board Chair Gloria Sirobe said IDC is aligned with South Africa's G20 presidency goals, emphasizing a shared commitment to driving inclusive growth and elevating Africa's role in global trade and innovation.
So when South Africa assumed the G20 presidency, our collective responsibility, guided by the President, was clear: to champion inclusive growth and unlock opportunities that position Africa as a key player in global trade and innovation.
Sirobe added that business ambitions aligns with the AfCFTA, saying the agreement opens major opportunities to build regional value chains in energy, agro-processing, automotive and green technologies, boosting jobs, innovation and Africa's influence in global markets.
Our ambitions are firmly aligned with the African Continental Free Trade Area, which offers unprecedented opportunities for intra-African trade and industrial collaboration. By leveraging AfCFTA's framework, we aim to build competitive regional value chains in sectors such as energy, agro-processing, automotive and green technologies, creating jobs, driving innovation, and ensuring Africa's voice is strong in global markets.
Michael Mbewe, Channel Africa News, Johannesburg.
Has broken out in the east of the Democratic Republic of Congo just days after representatives of the government and the M23 rebels signed a framework for peace in the Qatari capital of Doha. Authorities say the rebels have seized a strategic village in South Kivu province that has routes connecting to different parts of eastern Congo. SABC correspondent Chris Ochamringa has more from Kinshasa.
The Congolese army says
The M23 rebels carried out a surprise attack on their positions in the territory of Shabunda over the weekend. After hours of fighting, the rebels took control of the village of Maimingi in the country's east. Violent clashes are still going on between the warring parties in the mineral-rich region of South Kivu province. The clashes come 2 days after representatives of the DRC government and the rebels signed a framework for peace in Qatar. The framework is supposed to establish a ceasefire, prisoner exchanges, and the restoration of state authority in the rebel-held areas, among 5 other key points. Earlier this year, the M23 rebels captured the eastern DRC city of Goma and Bukavu. The DRC government and UN experts accused Rwanda of deploying more than 6,000 soldiers to fight alongside the rebels to seize the cities. But Rwanda denied the accusation and blamed the DRC for supporting a Hutu militia known as FDLR that seeks to destabilize its government. The US and Qatar are trying to secure a peace deal, but their efforts have not been successful so far. Thousands of people have been killed and millions displaced since the fighting began in late 2021. Chris Ochamringa, SABC News, Kinshasa.
Channel Africa is evolving, and so are you. Stay connected wherever you are with our brand new website and mobile app. Stream your favorite shows, catch up on African news, culture, and conversations, all at your fingertips.
Africa is just a tap away.
Your world, your stories, now on the go.
Stay connected wherever you are.
Visit channelafrica.co.za or download the Channel Africa app today. Channel Africa, the African perspective. From Africa's broadcast capital to the furthest corners of the globe, this is Rise and Shine, every weekday mornings on Channel Africa.
That's how we end the show today on this
Absolutely.
Wednesday, the 19th of November. Thank you so much for listening.
Before I disappear, just a reminder that this weekend, special dedicated programming of the G20 Leaders Summit. You can catch it all on Channel Africa. And we start the special broadcast at 8 a.m. Central African time on Saturday. So catch us Saturday and Sunday for the G20 Leaders Summit. From me, Peter Ndoro, have an awesome day, everybody. And coming up shortly is the news and On the Move with Palesa and Mr. Mushatam.
I'm Asanda Beda. Goodbye from us. We'll do this again tomorrow, 6 till 9 in the morning.
SABC News. The African perspective.
Thank you, Asanda. Looking at your top stories, fresh fighting breaks out in East DRC, and the U.S. president defends the Saudi crown prince over journalist Jamal Khashoggi's killing. Your latest news. Greetings to our listeners. Fresh fighting has broken out in the east of the Democratic Republic of Congo. This is just days after representatives of the government and the M23 rebels signed a framework for peace in the Qatari capital of Doha. Authorities say the rebels have seized a strategic village in South Kivu province that has routes connecting to different parts of eastern Congo. Chris Okamringa in Kinshasa reports.
The Congolese army says the M23 rebels carried out a surprise attack on their positions in the territory of Shabunda over the weekend. After hours of fighting, the rebels took control of the village of Maimingi in the country's east. Violent clashes are still going on between the warring parties in the mineral-rich region of South Kivu province. The clashes come 2 days after representatives of the DRC government and the rebels signed a framework for peace in Qatar. The framework is supposed to establish a ceasefire, prisoner exchanges, and the restoration of state authority in the rebel-held areas, among 5 other key points.
South Africa's President Cyril Ramaphosa is adamant that the G20 Leaders Summit is going to be a success. Ramaphosa met with media representatives from the National Editors Forum and Media Monitoring Africa. They've handed over Media 20 declarations where they called on G20 leaders to prioritize media freedom, combat the wave of disinformation, and push for media sustainability. The president has assured the media fraternity that their issues will be raised during the G20 summit this weekend.
We will, after the G20, want to tell our people the various efforts that have gone into making this G20 successful, because it is going to be successful. And we would like the media to focus on that because we are on the global map. Everybody is watching us. Yes, we do have flaws, like any country has flaws at any given time. But the important historic moment where an African country, which is laden with many problems and challenges, is demonstrating that it can rise.
The South African Police Service has meanwhile said protests at the G20 Leaders Summit this weekend at the Nasrec Expo Centre south of Johannesburg will only be allowed in designated areas around the venue. This was announced during a media briefing by the National Joint Operational and Intelligence Structure on the security cluster's state of readiness to secure the summit.